Chapter 247. In Heavenly Stellar City, a white figure quickly passed by, heading straight for the general family. The pedestrians only saw a flash of white light in front of their eyes, before they could no longer see the figure. The general family was a famous family in Heavenly Stellar City, and was very eye-catching. Ning Chen quickly arrived in front of the general family's residence and stopped. He looked at the two guards at the door and calmly said, "Where's Jiang Xian?" The two guards looked at the figure that suddenly appeared, and were clearly startled. They couldn't react for a while. "Where's Jiang Xian?" Ning Chen took a step forward, and grabbed the neck of the guard on the left. His attitude was clearly cold. The guard on the side saw this, and immediately chopped down with his blade. However, before the blade could land, it was knocked back several feet by a strong aura. "I'll ask you one last time, where's Jiang Xian?" Ning Chen narrowed his eyes, and a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. She's locked in the Great Elder's dungeon." The guard was so scared that he couldn't speak clearly and stammered. Ning Chen waved his hand, and threw the guard to the side. He quickly rushed into the general family's residence. "How dare you!" The commotion outside the door had obviously attracted the attention of the experts in the general family. Three peaked ninth grade experts walked out, and looked at the intruder with anger in their eyes. In Heavenly Stellar City, there was actually someone who dared to break into the general family's residence. They must have lived too long. The three elders appeared, and surrounded the plain-clothed figure in the courtyard. This surprised everyone in the general family. Who was this person that actually alarmed the three elders? "Get out of the way." Ning Chen's eyes were filled with killing intent. He looked at the three and coldly said, looking at this ruthless gaze, the three of them felt a chill run down their bodies. They couldn't say anything. He was clearly a ninth grade natal stage expert, but he had such a terrifying pressure. The three of them didn't dare to delay any longer. They made the first move and three sharp blade lights slashed down. Ning Chen was worried about Jiang Xian's safety, so he didn't show any mercy. He clenched his hand, and a beautiful blade flew out from a weapon rack not far away. It spun like the wind, and the blades in the three people's hands broke. Their bodies were covered in blood as they flew out. Pung pung pung. The three heavy sounds of them landing shocked everyone present. The blade left them with a chance to live. Although Ning Chen was angry, he didn't lose his reason, and let the three people live. Jiang Xian was a member of Jiang Xian's family. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he could not be too ruthless. Her white figure disappeared before everyone's eyes as she hurried towards the dungeon. He had just used his spiritual sense to scan the area, and Jiang Xian's aura was indeed there. However, at the next moment a powerful aura blocked the way. Blade light appeared out of nowhere, and came straight for his life. Ning Chen countered with a backhand strike with his beautiful saber. With a loud clang, the torrential current surged. Not far away, a rockery shattered with a loud bang and fell into the water below. "Great Elder!" Joy flashed through the eyes of the members of the general clan. Since the first elder had appeared, it was impossible for this audacious person to continue acting so arrogantly. "You are the Great Elder?" When Ning Chen heard this, his eyes narrowed. He was the one who had locked his heart away. Since the truth was unclear, Ning Chen didn't want to waste any more time. He moved his feet, and went around the person in front of him, heading straight for Elder D. The first elder's expression turned cold. Just as he was about to stop him, he discovered that he had already passed by and disappeared. In the general clan's dungeon, Ning Chen walked over. Before the guard could approach him, he was sent flying by a wave of qi. The iron chains were fastened, and Jiang Xian's hands were bound. His body was mottled with blood, and his tattered white clothes were full of whip marks and dried blood. "Master!" Jiang Xian called out hoarsely when he saw the person who had come. His heart that had been holding on for a long time finally softened, and tears fell like rain. "It's all right. Master is here." Ning Chen's pupils shrank, but they instantly returned to normal. He softly responded, waved his hand to break all the iron chains, then carried Jiang Xian on his back, and walked out step by step. His steady steps were one step after another. Ning Chen's calmness was abnormal. However, after he walked past, the prison guard who was half lying on the ground began to tremble, as if he had seen the most terrifying monster. His black hair danced in the wind. The instant he appeared on the ground, thunder rumbled in the sky. The strongest killing intent condensed in the sky and turned into a huge rock. Its ferocious aura soared into the sky. Crack. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the sky suddenly darkened. Thunder rumbled in the sky, illuminating the terrifyingly calm youth below. "All of you deserve to die." Those were the calmest words, but they contained an unquestionable coldness. Having lost his calm, Ning Chun returned to his most emotionless self. His killing intent was like a berserk mist that shook heaven and earth. That oppressive and terrifying aura made everyone present feel as if they had fallen into an icy cavern. They were so terrified that they couldn't breathe. In the next instant, the white-clothed figure moved. A beautiful blade swept out, and the first elder bore the brunt of the attack. The blade fell, blood flew, and an arm was cut off. In just one move, the first elder who had been in the Xiantian realm for nearly 100 years had lost an arm. Blood sprayed across the sky. The first elder was both startled and infuriated. He wanted to run, but the absolute difference in strength made that a delusion. With another slash of the beautiful blade, another arm was sent flying. "Exalted Master, save me!" The first elder was terrified, and he miserably howled. Not far away, Jiang Hua, who had seen the changes in the sky above the general family, was hastily rushing back. When he heard this cry for help, he sped up and rushed back. "Fengchen, there's been a change in the family. I'll go first." "Yes." Luan Fengchen nodded, but she was still worried, so she also followed. Within the general family, the first elder's face was filled with terror. Looking at the young figure walking over, he was constantly trying to stall for time. Boom! A furious clap of thunder fell from the sky, striking the alien giant Peng's body. Heaven and earth immediately became unbalanced, and the ear-piercing cries of thousands of birds rang out. Scram! Ning Chun raised his head, killing intent flashing in his eyes. His beautiful blade slashed out, and a dazzling saber light slashed through the sky, crashing into the furious lightning. Lightning crackled as the two poles collided. Immediately, it exploded with a bang and scattered across the world. During this short pause, Jiang Hua finally arrived in time. When he saw the miserable state of the first elder on the ground, his brows furrowed and his killing intent surged. "You've gone too far." Jiang Hua slashed out with his leaning moon saber. The saber light was like a divine moon descending, releasing a dazzling moonlight. Ning Chun coldly snorted and slashed out with his beautiful blade. With a huge explosion, the ground beneath him split apart. Ning Chun exerted force in his hand, and a blade light flashed past, shaking off Jiang Hua. Ning Chun's figure flashed, and he walked far away. He put down Jiang Xian, who was on his back, and gently rubbed the little girl's hair. He said softly, "Wait here for Master." After saying that, Ning Chun turned and walked toward Jiang Hua. The alien giant Peng let out a long cry and scattered into Ning Chun's body. Its surging aura constantly filled the world. Ha! With a shout, the beautiful blade condensed a blue light that flashed in front of everyone's eyes. The white and blue light collided, and the saber light continuously scattered. Facing an unprecedented enemy, Jiang Hua didn't dare be careless. He used all his strength to deal with it. The exchange of sabers was so fast that it was dazzling. In the blink of an eye, dozens of fierce moves had already been exchanged. Saber wounds appeared on Ning Chun's body, and blood flowed out, dyeing his clothes red. On the other hand, Jiang Hua's body was much better. Other than his clothes being a bit messy, he hadn't suffered any injuries. However, Jiang Hua's expression was not relaxed. Instead, it was extremely grave. Something wasn't right. The person in front of him didn't seem to have used the saber for long. It was more like he was deliberately hiding something. However, the speed of his improvement was truly astonishing. In just a short exchange, he had already absorbed his moves at an extremely fast speed. Just as Jiang Hua was thinking, a red-clothed, red-haired figure appeared in the battlefield. It was Luan Fengchen, who had just arrived. "It's you." Luan Fengchen's eyes narrowed as he looked at the figure not far away. Although his appearance had changed, his aura wouldn't lie. It was definitely him. Seeing that his identity had been exposed, Ning Chun didn't hide anymore. He waved his hand to disperse his disguise and returned to his original appearance. His handsome and young face shocked everyone present, and they immediately thought of the Sacred Land's kill order. "Are you afraid?" Ningchen looked back at Jiang Xian and asked softly. "No." Jiang Xian shook her head and replied. No matter who her master was, she only knew that the person in front of her was her master. Heh. Ningchen chuckled and turned his head. He waved his right hand, and Qing Mo flew out. In an instant, the cloth was torn, and the sword was in his hand. With the sword in hand, Ning Chen's aura had completely changed. A powerful and sharp sword intent spiraled up, lingering between heaven and earth. Frost condensed on Qing Mo's sword, making it extremely cold. "Brother Hua, this is the person the Sacred Land wants. How about you give him to Yu Fengchen?" Luan Fengchen's fan dissipated and turned into a blood-red saber. He took a step forward. "Forgive me for not being able to comply. This person has caused trouble in my family, so he must be dealt with by the Jiang family." Jiang Hua didn't fear the Sacred Land's name and didn't back down at all. Luan Fengchen frowned and slowly said, "Since that's the case, we can only rely on our own abilities." "That's exactly what I was thinking," said Jiang Hua. His figure had already disappeared, and the leaning moon saber once more sparkled with moonlight. Luan Fengchen didn't want to give Ningchen up. He also moved, and his saber became a dazzling red. Ningchen wasn't afraid in the slightest. On his right was Qing Mo fighting moonlight, while in his left was the bright moon saber. The saber's edge was soul-sucking, and the sword's end was hanging in the air. Luan Fengchen's weapon changed from a saber to a sword, which increased the pressure on Jiang Hua. He could only focus on his saber. On the other side, the rainbow saber and the bright saber faced each other. Luan Fengchen also felt a powerful pressure. His comprehension of the saber intent from the Jiang family was still raw, but it was gradually revealing his extraordinary attainments. The saber and sword faced the dual sabers. Sword and saber light flashed with a dazzling brilliance. Ningchen was fighting 1 against 2. This was the first time he had used his full strength since breaking through the third tribulation. His battle intent had reached the peak of his life. The bright saber and Qing Mo's sparks flew in all directions. Their cold blades clashed in an instant. It was a battle of absolute speed. The rainbow saber swung out, and a strand of black hair fell to the ground. The bright saber that met the bright saber was dyed red with her opponent's blood. The battle between the strongest fifth tribulation experts was unimaginable. It shocked the Jiang family, as well as the other Xiantian experts in Heavenly Stellar City. The three people's auras had all reached their peak. The terrifying pressure was unstoppable. The surrounding houses couldn't withstand this terrifying power, and began to collapse. Dust filled the air. Chapter 248. The Battle of the General Family had attracted the attention of the Xiantian masters in Heavenly Stellar City. There were 3 masters in different clothes. One of them was the Heavenly Stellar City Lord, and the other 2 were his guests. They came from different sects in the southern region. What an amazing battle! One of the men in blue and white clothes said in shock. "Jie, he's still a little kid. He's too arrogant." The old man next to him laughed. In the middle, the Heavenly Stellar City Lord did not say anything. He watched the battle, and his heart was also not calm. Whether it was the young man who fought like a god, or the head of the general family, they had both surpassed ordinary Xiantian masters. They had reached a height that was difficult to reach. "I'll go down and take a look." The old man smiled and flew towards the general family. The Heavenly Stellar City Lord frowned. He wanted to stop the old man, but he did not say anything. He just let the old man fly down. In the general family, the old man grabbed a person and asked, "What happened? Why did that young man come to the general family?" The person who was caught was scared out of his wits. He stuttered and told the old man what had happened. The old man tossed the person in his hand to the side and looked towards Jiang Xian in the distance. A glint of light flashed through his gloomy eyes. So it was her, the shame of the Jiang clan that everyone knew. In the general family, the battle was still going on. The 3 strongest people danced on the ground. It was a battle of cultivation, sword intent and saber skills. One was the pride of the Holy Land, and the other was the invincible master of the general family. In the blink of an eye, the sword and saber continued to collide. Ning Chen's cultivation had reached the peak. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth revolved around his body. The white figure was getting stronger and stronger. He was constantly absorbing the saber intent of the Holy Land's successor. His saber was getting faster and faster. Duan Fengchun felt the pressure increase. He had mastered the saber intent of the general family and the Holy Land's moves. His understanding of the saber was improving at an extremely fast speed. The battle was getting more and more intense. The figure who fought like a god had a higher understanding of the saber. He used his saber and sword at the same time and pushed away two people. In a flash, the saber and sword were exchanged. The plain white figure disappeared, and the yin saber in her hand flashed with a brilliant color. The saber intent of the yin saber made Hua Dun feel a terrifying pressure. It was on a completely different level, and it was as if he had been reborn. The figure that disappeared in a flash reappeared on the other side. The sword light was resplendent and stronger than before, suppressing the rainbow saber. The bloody light filled the sky. Xuangchang retreated with a strange expression on his face. Seeing that his opponent was getting stronger and stronger, his saber turned into 1,000 different forms as he unleashed his ultimate moves. When the blood maple appeared, the surging saber intent mixed with the maple leaves filling the sky. It turned into the world and charged at the white figure before him. On the other side, Jiang Hua's blade condensed a moon. A brilliant moonlight fell, dazzling and blinding. Heaven's scroll unparalleled in the world. Ning Chen's figure quickly turned and flew up. The beautiful saber in his hand turned into endless saber, that scattered in all directions. In an instant, the beautiful saber light was like a rapid current that scattered in all directions. When the heaven scroll appeared again, its might was completely different. The two's ultimate moves were instantly nullified. They were brushed by the dancing saber light, and were forced to retreat several steps. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchun both had blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. In the clash of their ultimate moves, they had actually lost by half a step. However, the two of them were both heavenly geniuses of their generation. They had fought countless battles in their lives, so the difference of half a move didn't hinder their battle intent. Ning Chen's expression was exceptionally cold. He swung his saber and sword, each of them facing the other two. There was no more burden, no more restraint. There was only the coldest saber and sword, a merciless ending that would decide the outcome of the battle. In this peak battle, the sparks from the clash of sabers and swords, and the bloody light that spilled out faintly appeared in everyone's eyes. They couldn't see it clearly, but it was still so cold and dazzling. Just at this moment, an elderly figure appeared beside Jiang Exan in the distance. He flipped his palm and condensed qi before pressing it against Jiang Exan's head. He indifferently said, "Young man, do you think that with this palm of mine, she will still be alive?" His threatening voice resounded through the entire area. The expressions of the general family's people changed slightly. Even Jiang Hua frowned, revealing an unhappy expression. Martial artists all had their own pride. This method was truly too despicable. The despicable method instantly took effect. Ning Chen's attack stopped, and in an instant blood flew out from his back. "You're courting death," Ning Chen shouted angrily with his cold eyebrows. In the dazzling light of blue and dark yellow, he put his sword and saber together and dashed out quickly. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchun were the first to bear the brunt. The moment they blocked with their sabers, their arms shook and blood gushed out. Heaven and earth resonate, life and death defying fate. The saber and sword left their hands and turned into two streams of light, one blue and one yellow. They attracted the power of heaven and earth, and saber light and sword intent descended. Heaven and earth twin scrolls, the only move that could be cultivated at the same time. In an instant, heaven and earth collapsed. A large area of space and earth couldn't bear the huge force and collapsed violently. It was like the end of the world. The hunchbacked old man didn't have time to react before the saber light and sword intent rushed into his body. In an instant, there was a shocking explosion, and blood and bones filled the sky. Sui flashed and waved her hand to disperse the blood and bones. She took Jiang Exan and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Ning Chen appeared in front of the cliff and waterfall. He put down Jiang Exan and stabbed his saber and sword into the ground. He turned his palm and condensed chi, quickly healing her. Frost surged, shattering the seal within Xian's body with a bang. Under the effects of the life scroll and phoenix blood, the whip wounds all over her body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Pieces of scabs fell off, gradually restoring her original appearance. Not long after, Jiang Xian opened her eyes and looked at the unfamiliar yet familiar young figure in front of her. Her eyes were filled with tears, longing, excitement, and endless grievances. "Master!" She threw herself at him and sobbed. In the end, she was only a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Not only had she been ridiculed on a daily basis, but she had also suffered such an unforeseen event this time. How could she bear it? Ningchen patted her back and comforted her for a while. Then he said softly, "All right, you're a big girl now. You can't always be like a child." "Master, can I follow you in the future?" Jiang Xian asked while sobbing. Ningchen hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Jiang Xian would not return to the general family. Now that she had no one to rely on, she could only follow him. It just so happened that during this period of time, he wanted to give Jiang Xian as much power to protect herself as possible to prevent the tragedy from happening again. "How's your master's cultivation technique?" Ningchen thought for a moment and asked. Jiang Xian reluctantly left her master's embrace and nodded. "I've been working hard on it. I'll show it to you once." After saying that, Jiang Xian walked to the spacious area in front of the waterfall. With a flip of her hand, a sparkling white light vaguely appeared. Ningchen waved his hand, and the yin saber flew out and landed in Jiang Xian's hand. He said calmly, "Attack me. Let me see your progress." Jiang Xian's expression turned serious when she heard that. The yin saber in her hand flashed with a flash of light, approaching 3 inches from Ningchen's heart. Clang! Jiang Xian put 2 fingers on the saber and immediately took advantage of the momentum. 6 out of 10 of the saber's sharpness disappeared, leaving only 4. Jiang Xian flipped the saber again and shook off Jiang Xian's fingers. A strange look flashed across Ningchen's eyes. Not a bad reaction. Jiang Xian leaned slightly to the side, and the saber's light slashed past her heart in the nick of time. Compared to before, she was 2 inches closer. The snowflakes scattered and condensed into a pure white saber. Ningchen held it with his left hand and did not move from his spot. He swung the saber and slashed down. With a clang, the snowy saber's sharpness quickly disappeared in the sparkling white light. At the same time, the yin saber met the attack and blocked the remaining momentum. In the next moment, the yin saber turned sharp again, and the cold light was dazzling. Since he had seen what he wanted to see, Ningchen flicked his finger and deflected the saber's light. He said calmly, "All right, you don't have to continue. That's enough." Jiang Xian immediately put away the saber in her hand and stood in front of him nervously, waiting for her master's judgment. Not bad. Ningchen was not stingy with his exaggerations. After he finished speaking, he changed the topic and continued. "However, if you want to improve faster, you have to experience more battles. From tomorrow onwards, I'll take you to various sects to challenge them. Don't disappoint me and your master." "Yes." Jiang Xian nodded. She was nervous and uneasy. This was the first time she was going on a long journey, and she had to face various sections. It would be a lie to say that she was not nervous. "Let's go. This place is no longer safe. Someone will come looking for us soon." After he finished speaking, Ningchen turned around and walked towards the west. Jiang Xian immediately followed. Not long after, the two of them disappeared into the dense forest. The sun set and the moon rose. Soon, it was the cycle of the moon setting and the sun rising again. On Celestial Forest Mountain, Ningchen changed his appearance and brought Jiang Xian to the first destination of this trip. Celestial Forest Mountain was a powerful sect with the second tribulation innate expert overseeing it. When they sensed the two of them appearing out of thin air, they immediately appeared to deal with them. Ningchen's goal was very simple. Celestial Forest Mountain had a rank 4 disciple to fight with Jiang Xian. Celestial Forest Mountain's innate expert sensed the powerful aura of the young man in front of him. He did not want to offend him easily, So he agreed and chose a direct disciple to compete with the person brought by the latter. A rank 4 against a rank 3. It seemed like a battle without any suspense. However, under the glamorous blade and the sparkling white light, Jiang Xian quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. In less than a quarter of an hour, Jiang Xian was defeated. Jiang Xian had almost no actual combat experience. Even though her combat strength was absolutely suppressed, she still suffered some injuries. This fully revealed the shortcomings of a beginner martial artist. For the remaining 2 days, Ning Chun did not bring Jiang Xian to other places to challenge. Instead, he let the latter digest the gains of this battle by herself. 2 days later, the two of them appeared again. This time, they changed to another large sect and continued their journey of challenge. This time, Jiang Xian's battle was even more difficult. Her opponent was at the peak of the rank 4 and was about to step into the rank 5. The difference in cultivation almost caused her to lose several times. In the end, she barely won by a hair's breadth and ended this intense battle. It took 3 days for her to recover. 3 days later, the two of them walked out and embarked on the journey of challenge again. In the following 2 to 3 months, Ning Chun brought Jiang Xian to and fro. They constantly challenged various large sects and fully displayed Jiang Xian's talent for battle. Following that, the latter's cultivation rose rapidly. Soon, she reached the peak of the rank 4. The natural chasm between the rank 4 and the rank 5 was the first hurdle in the acquired realm. Many people were stuck at this point for their entire lives, unable to advance even an inch. However, Jiang Xian had a rank 3 innate expert by her side to teach her. She also cultivated the invincible quiet moon technique. It was only a matter of time before she stepped into the rank 5. After challenging the large sects in Nanjiang, Ning Chun brought Jiang Xian to the west. Once they were done in the west, they headed north. Very soon, the news of a young innate ranker bringing a little girl to challenge all over the place spread like wildfire. Chapter 249. For 3 consecutive months, Jiang Xian spent every day either fighting or recuperating. Ning Chun did not interfere and only watched from the side. The Xiantian cultivators of the various large sects would usually give face to the little girl and choose disciples to fight due to the powerful Xiantian cultivators by her side. After a series of challenges, the two people's identities attracted more and more curiosity and suspicion from the various large sections. They investigated in many ways, but there were few results. The little girl's cultivation method was extremely unfamiliar. Only her blade technique seemed somewhat familiar, but it was covered by the white light, so it was difficult to recall it immediately. Ning Chun had never stayed in a single region for too long with Jiang Xian. He knew very well that Jiang Xian's identity would be exposed sooner or later. It would be fine if it was the Jiang clan, but if the Longevity Hall and the 4 Extremities Sacred Grounds came after them, they would be in a lot of trouble. The two of them traveled from the southern border to the western region, then to the northern region. As they advanced, Jiang Xian's strength improved extremely quickly. When they fought again, the ordinary 5th rank cultivators were almost completely suppressed, and it was difficult for them to retaliate. Ning Chun once again increased the difficulty of Jiang Xian's challenges. He requested that her opponents be 6th rank and above every time she challenged them. The difference of 2 ranks immediately caused the little girl to fall into a difficult situation. On her 3rd challenge, she encountered a peak 6th rank disciple of a large sect. After a difficult battle she lost for the first time. Jiang Xian's mood immediately sank, and she did not recover for several days. Clearly, her first defeat after winning so many times was a huge blow to her. Is it very painful? Ning Chun asked for the first time in 3 days. Jiang Xian nodded. The unwillingness and discomfort on her face were difficult to conceal. The inferiority complex that had been suppressed for so long unconsciously rose up, and she began to doubt herself once again. There is no one in this world who is absolutely undefeated. If there is, I only know of 2 people who can be considered undefeated in their entire lives. Ning Chun said calmly. Jiang Xian raised her head, and a trace of curiosity appeared on her discomfort. She asked, "Who are they?" "Your master and a senior of mine." Ningchen replied. Master, you're so powerful, but you've lost before? Jiang Xian asked in confusion. Heh. Ningchen laughed softly and replied. I've lost before, and I've lost very miserably. If it weren't for my luck, I might have died at your master's hands long ago. A trace of shock flashed through Jiang Xian's eyes. This was the first time she had heard her master talk about the matters between him and her master. She originally thought that the two of them were very good friends. Otherwise, why would her master impart the Tao on behalf of her master? Master, can you tell me more about you and Shizhuan? General Hart asked expectantly. Ningchen didn't refuse and nodded lightly. It was time for General Xian to learn more about Fan Lingyue's past. As her only disciple, how could he not know anything about her master? Ningchen casually found a place to sit down and patiently explained Fan Lingyue's past to Jiang Xian. Regardless of whether he agreed or disagreed with the matter, Ningchen spoke without any subjective emotions. The right and wrong of Fan Lingyue's every action had to be judged by the little girl herself. He wouldn't deliberately guide her. Jiang Xian was fascinated by the story. Her small face was full of expressions, and all kinds of wonderful changes were happening. She was quite shocked by the matter between her master and her master. She really didn't expect the relationship between the two to be so complicated. They fought each other to the death, and in the end, they even entrusted their lives to each other. After a long time, Ningchen stood up and glanced at the little girl who was still engrossed in the story beside him. He said calmly, General Xian, everyone has their own different path. If you fall, just get back up. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Your master's path is short and exciting. She has already finished walking it. Regardless of right or wrong, success or failure, the most important thing is that she has never regretted it. It's the same for you. Right or wrong, even success or failure, there's actually not such a clear boundary between right and wrong. What's important is how you view it in your heart. Hearing these words, General Xian fell silent. She quietly thought about what her master had said, and a struggle constantly flashed across her face. Ningchen didn't disturb her, and allowed her to think on her own. She needed to think through this matter by herself. If she couldn't overcome this hurdle in her heart, her path would stop here. The sun set and the moon rose. In the blink of an eye, another day had passed. Jiang Xian didn't say a word since evening. She sat there motionlessly. Not far ahead was the 10,000 Snow Mountain. It was the strongest sect in the northern region, besides the former Immortal Ascension realm. Ningchen was waiting for a result. Whether or not they would be able to reach the 10,000 Snow Mountain tomorrow depended on whether or not General Xian could overcome this hurdle in her heart. It was cold in the northern region, especially when night fell. Ningchen lit a fire in front of General Xian, and then sat quietly to the side to wait. Just as the cold moon rose to the southernmost sky, the aura around Jiang Xian's body began to change. Strands of spiritual qi of heaven and earth circled around him, forming a clear vortex. A trace of gratification flashed through Ningchen's eyes. Not bad. She didn't disappoint him. The spiritual qi around the fire became more and more obvious, attracting the attention of quite a few people in the distance. At the foot of the 10,000 Snow Mountain, one figure after another rushed out. Their bodies shone with dazzling brilliance as they quickly approached the two of them. Sensing the approaching figures, Ningchen's face turned cold. What had to come had finally come. 3 Xiantian experts, 17 peak 9th grade experts, and countless others. They had clearly been waiting for a long time. The man in the lead was dressed in bright silver armor. His aura was abnormally vigorous. He had clearly surpassed the third tribulation of the Xiantian realm. It really is you. The realm lord's guess was right, said Xiancheng coldly, as he looked at the spinning cloud disk in his hand. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Ningchen didn't say anything. He pulled out the sword on his back and stabbed it into the ground beside General Xian. Frost condensed on the sword, and the sword intent that occasionally appeared made people feel a heavy pressure. The battle at the general family had taught him a lesson. This time, he absolutely couldn't make the same mistake. With the beautiful saber in hand, a beautiful killing light flashed. It was abnormally cold. Kill! With an order, the sword light pressed forward. The 2 Xiantian experts and 17 peaked 9th grade experts were the first to bear the brunt. Behind them, the army followed in batches. As the cold light approached, the beautiful saber in Ning Chen's hand spun. With a swing of the saber, 2 Xiantian experts were blown away. Then came the peaked 9th grade experts. His sword technique formed a formation. Wherever the beautiful saber light passed, it actually dissipated in a short time. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. What a strange sword formation. The battle continued. The 2 Xiantian experts' swords pressed forward, while the other 17 people's sword formations supported them. For a time the beautiful saber light dimmed. Not far away, Xiancheng held a long halberd. He quietly observed the development of the battle, ready to attack at any time. The beautiful saber blocked the 2 swords. Flowing light scattered in all directions. At the same time, the sword formation's killing light was awe-inspiring. It kept pressing forward. Its exquisiteness was amazing. Above the plain clothes, under the corner of a sleeve, the same sword light attacked Ning Chen's ear. A strand of black hair fell silently, showing off in front of an expert. Ning Chen snorted coldly. He flipped his palm and pushed away the people surrounding him. His figure instantly retreated 30 feet. He raised his hand and pointed. As snowflakes fell, 19 snow-colored sword light condensed. With a wave of his hand, he swept toward the sword formation in front of him. Clang! The 2 Xiantian experts faced each other with their swords and barely blocked it. The remaining 17 peaked 9th grade experts weren't so lucky. Even if they blocked 70% of the sword intent with the power of the sword formation, they were still injured by the remaining force. Blood splattered across the wasteland. Seeing that the sword formation couldn't withstand it, Xiancheng didn't dare to delay any longer. His figure swept past, and his long halberd slashed toward the moon. Ning Chen's figure leaned to one side, avoiding the sharp edge of the long halberd. As he turned around, his sword fingers condensed frost and pointed toward the former's dantian. The long halberd in Xiancheng's hand spun rapidly, trying to block the swift and fierce sword intent. However, the beautiful blade had already passed. The blade shook off the long halberd that was spinning. With a loud bang, blood splattered everywhere. Brilliant bloody light filled the eyes. A strange look flashed across Ning Chen's eyes. He saw an Xiantian expert using his own body to block in front of Xiancheng, forcefully resisting the sword. A terrifying wound appeared on his right rib. Luo Xiao. Xiancheng was shocked and angry. He grabbed Luo Xiao in front of him and quickly retreated dozens of feet. He flipped his palm and condensed qi to heal Luo Xiao. The sudden change in the battle left only one Xiantian expert in the sword formation. The army at the back finally caught up. The soldiers surged like a tide, and the sound of killing shook the sky. Ning Chen praised the friendship of the Xiantian expert just now. However, the beautiful blade in his hand still didn't show any mercy. Wherever the cold blade passed, brilliant bloody light filled the sky. It was a one-sided massacre. It was bloody and ruthless. The plain clothes were unshakable in the light of the blade and the shadow of the sword. Waterfall after waterfall of blood splattered continuously between heaven and earth. The army was endless, and the massacre continued without end. The cold night in the northern region was so cold, just like the heart that had already been set on killing. Once it was set on, it would no longer show any mercy. In the distance, Xiancheng did his best to heal Luo Xiao. After a long while, he finally stabilized the latter's injuries. "I'm fine now. The mission is more important," Luo Xiao said seriously. Xiancheng nodded gravely. He rushed forward, not daring to be careless in the slightest. The halberd that rushed over again was clearly a little more oppressive. Ning Chen met it with his beautiful blade, waiting with all his strength. Luo Xiao, who had recovered slightly from his injuries, also returned to the battlefield. His sword was swift and fierce. Working together with the other Xiantian expert and the remaining sword formation, they took his life. However, the difference in strength was still huge. Even though the army was endless, the sword formation was swift and fierce, and they had an absolute advantage in numbers. Ning Chen, who had stepped into the third tribulation of the Xiantian stage, was no longer someone who could be shaken by these people present. More and more people fell in the wilderness. Blood flowed in pools, and the situation of the battle was irreversible. In the sword formation, the 9th-level peak experts who had been seriously injured were in despair. They did not understand why the outcome had become like this. The cold moon gradually moved west, which meant that the night was about to end. The other Xiantian expert who was unwilling to lose forcibly broke away from the battlefield and rushed towards Jiang Xian, who was not far away. However, just as he was about to attack, the green ink sword shone brightly with silver light. A terrifying sword intent rose up and entered the Xiantian expert's body in an instant. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and regret, but it was already too late. In the next moment, there was a terrifying explosion. Flesh and blood scattered all over the sky. Ling Jiao. Xiancheng's heart was filled with grief. Seeing that it was difficult to reverse the situation, he had no choice but to suppress the hatred in his heart and order a retreat. Ning Chen's figure flashed, and he returned to Jiang Xian's side. He did not chase after him. They were less than 50 kilometers away from Mount Wanshui. Since the people from the sacred land had already appeared, Mount Wanshui must have known their identities. It seemed that there was no need to go to the challenge tomorrow. The cold wind whistled, and the desolation after the great battle was reflected everywhere. Beside the bonfire, Jiang Xian, who was on the verge of breaking through, finally took that crucial step. In an instant, the boundless white light rose, illuminating a radius of 100 meters. Chapter 250. In the eerie longevity hall, the disaster king stood quietly. Yu Yangtian, Xingyun, and Buyu stood below him, waiting for the noblest person of the 4 extreme realms to arrive. At this moment, the void swirled and rays of light overflowed. An illusory figure appeared, surrounded by 5 colors. It was dazzling. Region Master Yu Yangtian and the other 2 knelt down and bowed together. The disaster king had already entered the 3 disasters, so his status was different. He didn't need to kneel. Looking at the region master's figure in the void, he narrowed his eyes. The region master was stronger than before. How did it go? Did you find any traces of Meng Xuanji? The region master asked. I'm useless. There hasn't been any progress. Yu Yangtian lowered his head and apologized. The region master didn't say much. He turned to look at the figure beside him and said calmly, Disaster King, Xiancheng and the others have failed their mission. You should go personally. Okay. The disaster king nodded. The 3 of you, continue to pay attention to Meng Xuanji's whereabouts. I don't want to hear the same words again. The region master said one last sentence before disappearing. Yes. Yu Yangtian and the other 2 respectfully sent him off. Tianjin City, General Family. Jiang Hua sat on the main seat. Below him were 10 elders. The great elder sat in the main seat. His empty sleeves were dazzling to the eye. Lord, the spies sent the latest news. The people of the Holy Land surrounded the 10,000 Snow Mountain to kill that alien realm expert. In the end, they were defeated. An elder spoke. Jiang Hua nodded. He glanced at the great elder and said calmly, Great elder, your injuries are serious. You don't need to attend such meetings in the future. Recuperating is the most important thing. Hearing these words, the faces of the people below instantly changed. The eyes of the first elder, who was sitting at the head of the table, revealed a look of disbelief. Men, take the great elder to rest. Jiang Hua said coldly. Yes. 2 guards walked over and helped the old man up from the elder's seat. They walked out of the hall. The sudden blow made the great elder's expression change several times. He was not willing to be expelled just like that. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Jiang Hua's cold gaze from the main seat. His heart trembled, and he had to swallow the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Lord, Great Elder is thinking for the sake of the general family. Everyone knows that General Xian is unable to cultivate the martial path. Now that he has suddenly stepped into the martial path, it is truly abnormal. If we can obtain his cultivation technique, our general family might be able to produce a few more Xiantian experts, said an old man who had been stuck in the half-step Xiantian realm for over 10 years. Second Elder is right. Compared to Jiang Xian, who has just stepped onto the martial path, being able to advance the strength of the general family is more important. Although Great Elder's method is a bit radical, it is pardonable. The fourth elder also pleaded for leniency. After the two elders expressed their opinions, the other elders also began to plead for leniency for Great Elder. From their point of view, Great Elder's method was not too wrong. As for attracting the experts of the alien realm in the end, it was purely an accident. It was something that no one had expected. Jiang Hua quietly looked at the elders below him pleading for leniency for Great Elder. His expression did not change. After a long time, he waved his hand and said, "All right, I have already made up my mind. There is no need to say anything more. As for Jiang Xian's matter, no one can interfere. I will settle it myself." Hearing the master's unquestionable tone, the elders nodded helplessly and respectfully agreed. Half a day later, Jiang Hua went to the sword tomb. He immediately left the general family and rushed towards the northern region. In the four extreme holy lands, in the paradise on earth where the four extremes were like spring, a blood-red figure slowly walked back. His long red hair fluttered in the wind, and every step he took was steady. Everyone who saw him knelt down respectfully. "Welcome back, Saint." The powerful Xiantian experts lowered their noble heads and respectfully welcomed the return of the four extremes holy land. "Rise." Luanfeng walked over and immediately walked towards the highest palace in the distance. Rumble. The palace's doors opened and Luan Fengchen walked in. A dignified voice rang out. "You're willing to come back?" "I came back because I want to know the truth," said Luan Fengchen seriously. "What truth?" Multicolored light condensed within the palace, and the master of the four extremes indifferently walked out. "Are they really from another world? Also, is the matter of the eastern region's divine prefecture invading the four extremes holy land true?" asked Luan Fengchen. "You suspect that the holy land is lying?" asked the master of the four extremes holy land. "I want to hear it from you personally," said Luan Fengchen. "It's absolutely true," said the master of the four extremes holy land. "I'll trust you one more time. I will bring him back to the holy land." After saying that, Luan Fengchen turned and walked out of the palace. "I've already sent the disaster king to do that," reminded the master of the four extremes holy land. Luan Fengchen paused for a moment, and then left without looking back. In a corner of the holy land, there was an evaluation platform made of huge stone. A long and narrow bloodlight blade was stabbed into the stone. Luan Fengchen walked over and grabbed the blade's hilt. Immediately, a dazzling red light rose around him. "Ha!" Xiaochen shouted, and thunder roared through his body. The lightning pierced through his saber and brought out a bloody mist, making the rising red light in the sky even more resplendent. A moment later, the platform trembled, and the bloodlight blade slowly rose up. The lightning retracted and was contained within the blade. On this day, the holy son of the four extremes holy land had returned for a short period of time. After taking back his blade, he left once more. In the northern region, Ningchen brought Jiang Xian along as they traveled southeast. They fought whenever they encountered sections. He wanted Jiang Xian to grow as much as possible in this final period of time. By now, practically all the large sects knew who the two of them were. However, Ningchen still had no choice but to sit and watch as the two of them came to challenge him before leaving. Jiang Xian walked out of his obsession. He was no longer as obsessed with victory or defeat as before. Whether he won or lost, he would do his best in every battle, so that he would not have any regrets. The two of them moved faster and faster. They basically left as soon as they finished fighting. They never stayed in any place. A month later, there was no more news of the two of them in the northern region. The general family, the longevity hall, and even the four extremes holy land were all searching for them. However, they were always half a step too late, and found nothing. Another 3 months later, Ningchen brought Jiang Xian to the eastern region. He headed towards the Lihua Empire. News of the two of them had already disappeared for a very long time. Ningchen no longer brought Jiang Xian around to challenge people. Every day, he only used his feet to travel through the four extremes, covering every inch of land. During this period of time, Jiang Xian's cultivation had actually broken through again, successfully reaching the 6th rank. In less than a year, he had gone from having no foundation at all to the 6th rank. It was truly a little shocking. This was inseparable from Jiang Xian's hard work. Of course, Ning Chen's teaching method was also inconceivable. He brought a little girl, who was only at the third rank of the prenatal stage, to challenge the various great sects in the world. As long as her realm and comprehension reached a certain level, his foundation and cultivation basically relied on his phoenix blood. Only Ning Chen would do something like this. Only half of the 10 drops of phoenix blood that the 2 phoenixes had given him remained. Jiang Xian alone had used up 2 drops. After the 5th rank, it was not easy to increase one's realm. Ning Chen also felt that it would be difficult for Jiang Xian's cultivation to undergo another transformation in a short period of time, so he decided to bring her to the Lihua Empire. Ever since the Master of the Four Extremes Holy Land had returned to the world, the Four Extremes Holy Land had gradually stepped onto the stage. Their movements were becoming more frequent by the day. Coupled with the existence of the Longevity Hall, he had no choice but to be more careful. It was becoming more and more unsafe for Jiang Xian to be by his side. Furthermore, the opponents he would be facing next were far from what Jiang Xian could handle. Now, he had to send Jiang Xian to a trustworthy place. The cold moon hung high in the sky, and snowflakes drifted down. In the cold night, the clanging sound of hammering rang out continuously in the earthly craftsman manner. Even the falling snow could not stop the earthly craftsman from swinging his hammer. The little boy was practicing his sword not far away. Ever since he started learning the sword, the earthly craftsman rarely let him work the bellows. He only needed to focus on practicing his sword. The snowflakes were very big. The little boy was still young, and his cultivation was not high. It was a little difficult for him to resist the cold of the night, so his entire body was wrapped up like a dumpling. It was rare for him to reveal his sword-wielding hand, and he practiced again and again. Right at this moment, the wind and snow in the sky swirled. A white figure appeared out of thin air. Beside him was a little girl who looked to be about 16 or 17. She had a pretty face, and even though she was in the wind and snow, not a single snow touched her body. The little boy was stunned at first, then his face lit up with joy. He quickly ran over and said happily, "Big brother Ning, you're back." "Huh?" Ning Chen laughed softly. He patted the little boy's thick hat and said, "You're wrapped up like this. How did you practice your sword?" The little boy smiled embarrassedly. He was afraid of the cold, so he wore more. "Senior earthly craftsman." Ning Chen cupped his fists and said respectfully. The earthly craftsman raised his head and stopped the hammer in his hand. He said calmly, "I didn't expect you to actually dare to come back." "I have a clear conscience, so I naturally dare to come back," Ning Chen said. "I'll only ask you one thing. Is what the Holy Land said true?" The earthly craftsman asked calmly. Ning Chen's expression also became serious. He said seriously, "I do come from another realm. However, it was an accident that I came here. I'm not a spy sent by another realm like the Holy Land said. As for the Eastern region's divine prefecture's intention to invade the Four Extremes, it's purely the Holy Land and the Hall of Immortals twisting the truth. The real situation is that the Master of the Four Extremes and the Disaster King want to use external forces to open the boundary between the two realms and achieve their goal of invading the Eastern region's divine prefecture." The earthly craftsman stared at the former for a long time. After about 10 breaths, he lowered his head and continued to wave the hammer in his hand. He said, "Speak, why are you looking for me?" "I would like to ask senior earthly craftsman to take care of Jiangxin for a period of time," Ning Chen requested. The little boy looked at Ning Chen, then looked at his master. He ran up in a few steps and pleaded, "Master, just agree. Don't you still need someone to play the bellows?" The earthly craftsman knocked the little boy's head and said unhappily, "You have everything. All right, if she stays, then she stays. The earthly craftsman manor doesn't lack food for her." Hearing this, Ning Chen glanced at Jiangxin beside him and said softly, "Why aren't you thanking senior earthly craftsman?" "Thank you, senior earthly craftsman." Although Jiangxin was reluctant, she still nodded sensibly and went forward to bow. Only then did Ning Chen relax. He rubbed the little girl's hair and said, "After a period of time, Master will come back to pick you up. In the days that I'm away, You have to learn well from senior earthly craftsmen and cultivate hard. Don't be lazy. These slightly long-winded words made Jiangxin's nose sour. Tears kept rolling in her eyes. Only her master would say these words to her. Chapter 251. Ningchen left. He had nothing to worry about. He quickly flew towards the western part of the country. His figure flashed and disappeared quickly in the air. Before anyone could see him, he had already disappeared. From the eastern part of the country to the western part of the country, Ningchen didn't stop. Spiritual qi surrounded him, and he sped up. There were many celestial mountains in the western part of the country. It was a legendary place. The continent of the 9 clouds had been prosperous for thousands of years. But in less than a year, too many things had happened in the continent of the 9 clouds, especially the long-lived temple. People at the foot of the continent of the 9 clouds mountain felt uneasy. On this day, after the sun had set, a powerful figure appeared in front of the protective formation again. He was dressed in plain clothes and was flying through the air. Ningchen raised his hand and put it on the deployment spell. Qi rose up around him, and the deployment spell started shaking violently. It seemed like it was going to collapse at any moment. The patriarch of the continent of the 9 clouds, the sword Zun, the flower Zun, and the medicine Zun sensed it at the same time. They quickly arrived in front of the Taixian peak. When they saw the silhouette outside the deployment spell, they frowned. It was really him. Even though they had guessed it, when they saw him in person, they were still shocked. A cultivator at the Tian level had been hiding in front of them for such a long time, and they hadn't known about him at all. If he had had evil intentions. Thinking about that, the 4 of them were covered with cold sweat. Ningchen put his hand down on the deployment spell and looked at them calmly. He didn't say anything. The patriarch of the continent of the 9 clouds hesitated for a few seconds, but in the end, he dispersed the deployment spell. He knew that if that person attacked, the deployment spell wouldn't be able to stop him. "Your Excellency, why have you come to the continent of the 9 clouds?" asked the flower Zun. She was the only woman in the group. "I'm here to see Meng Xianji," replied Ningchen. "Sister Xianji left a few months ago. She's not in the continent of the 9 clouds now," said the flower Zun. Ningchen furrowed his brows. With a slight movement of his feet, he passed by the 4 of them and flew towards the 4 stars peak. "How dare you!" shouted the patriarch of the continent of the 9 clouds furiously. He wanted to attack, but the sword Zun stopped him and shook his head. He was also a sword cultivator, so he knew how terrifying that young man was. Without the golden feather drake, the 4 of them couldn't stop him even if they joined hands. The Xuanji Peak was filled with loneliness and silence. Ningchen's status was no longer the same as before. A day's separation was like the difference between heaven and earth. No matter where one was, the pre-celestial stage and the post-celestial stage were completely different existences. This heaven was the huge chasm between mortals and celestials. Since ancient times, how many proud sons of heaven were all blocked outside this layer of heaven, unable to take half a step forward in their entire lives? When Ningchen arrived at Xuanji Peak, he walked straight into Xuanji Hall. It was completely empty, and there was not a single person in sight. In the hall, ancient books were placed on a long bluestone table. The paper and bamboo slips were yellowed and emitted the aura of time. Ningchen stepped forward and flipped through the ancient books. A strange look flashed in his eyes. These were all books that he had read in the scripture pavilion. Why would they appear here? In the past, he had read these books because he wanted to understand more about this world, especially to deduce the purpose of the Eternal Life Hall. But to Meng Xuanji, these books were of no use. The only explanation was that Meng Xuanji wanted to know his motive. Among the many books, there was one ancient book that was more special. Mabai could recognize it at a glance from the other books. Back then, Meng Xuanji had cast the separation and reunion death seal on him. After bringing him to Xuanji Peak, she had given him this cultivation technique. At that time, he didn't want to owe anyone anything, so he hadn't touched it. Outside Xuanji Hall, the 9 Clouds sect leader, the Sword Venerable, and the others had also arrived. They entered the hall and looked at the young man in front of them with complicated expressions. Fear, anger, forbearance, and relief finally turned into a deep sense of helplessness. To have such achievements at such a young age, what kind of terrifying talent did he have? They didn't know that Ningchen wasn't considered a genius. Everything he had today was exchanged for by ordinary people. The pain he had suffered was more than 100 or 1,000 times more than ordinary people. After Meng Xuanji left, did the Eternal Life Hall come again? Ningchen turned and looked at the Nine Clouds sect leader calmly. The Sword Venerable understood the sect leader's temper and didn't want to have another conflict, so he stood out and answered, "They did. A few months ago, the Disaster King came personally to borrow the Golden Feather Dragon. He also brought 3 cultivators of the third tribulation of the Khanate realm with him. However, the Golden Feather Dragon was taken away by junior sister Xuanji. The Disaster King came too late and could only leave." Ningchen narrowed his eyes and continued. "One last question. Does the Golden Feather Dragon have the ability to break through space?" "Yes," the Nine Clouds sect leader answered. The Sword Venerable also nodded. The Golden Feather Dragon was the sharpest weapon in the world. It did have this ability. At this moment, Ningchen finally confirmed the suspicion he had for a long time. The Disaster King had spent so much effort to obtain the Golden Feather Dragon because he wanted to break through the boundary between the two realms. "Thank you for your answer." As soon as he finished speaking, Ningchen raised his hand and pointed. Suddenly, silver light fell from the sky, and an incomparably resplendent sword intent condensed. In an instant, it passed through the Xuanji Palace and slashed at the distant Heavenly Cast Peak. With a rumble, a clear sword mark appeared on Heavenly Cast Peak. It was so dazzling under the moonlight. "It really is you." The Sword Venerable was shocked. He immediately recognized this incomparable sword intent and exclaimed, "This sword strike is to repay the kindness of the Nine Clouds sect for taking me in back then. We'll meet again someday." As soon as she finished speaking, her white clothes scattered and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The Nine Clouds sect leader, the Flower Venerable, and the Medicine Venerable also felt the familiar aura in the majestic sword intent. A strange look flashed across their faces. It really was him. In this way, many of their previous doubts could be explained. When they went to the longevity banquet of the Holy Land, the Eternal Life Hall secretly sent Khanate cultivators to seize the Golden Feather Dragon. In the end, they were stopped by a mysterious swordsman. A few months ago, when Ningchen's identity was announced to the world by the Holy Land, they had such suspicions. Now that they saw it with their own eyes, they truly confirmed it. "Patriarch, I'm going back to Heavenly Cast Peak." The Sword Venerable was worried about the sword intent a moment before. He cupped his fist and turned into a sword. Lights flickered as he flew back to Celestial Sword Peak. Ningchen left, but he didn't leave the continent of the Nine Clouds. Instead, he flew up into the sky. This was something that he had always been curious about. Why did he fall from the sky back then? It was late at night, and the wind was cold. Up in the sky, it was extremely cold. It was unbearable. The higher he went, the stronger the gravitational force of the Four Extremes continent became. Ningchen's chi was being consumed rapidly. The life volume and the celestial volume revolved, and a huge vortex appeared around him. Extremely cold chi entered his body and rose up. He was barely able to resist the gravitational force. The earth volume's chi was much dimmer. It was too far away from the ground, and the environment was extremely bad. It was difficult to use it. 1,000 zhang later, the fog disappeared. It was extremely silent. The moonlight couldn't illuminate the eternal darkness. Ningchen was standing in the sky. He didn't understand. Something wasn't right. More accurately, there was something wrong with this world. His sword and blade flew into his hand. Dazzling lights flashed. His sword and blade emitted dazzling lights at the same time. The sword and blade resonated. Lights flashed and collided with the sky. In a flash, the entire sky started shaking violently. An earth-shattering explosion spread through the sky. However, the sky was unshakable. After shaking for a while, it returned to normal. In the holy palace of the Four Extremes Holy Land, the master of the Four Extremes territory sensed something. He used a secret technique to transmit his voice. "The Disaster King, he's at the top of the Nine Clouds Mountain." In the Long Life Temple, when the Disaster King heard the voice, he disappeared. The cultivators of the three disasters were extremely fast. Wherever they went, space became unstable and distorted. According to legends, when one reached the peak of the three disasters realm, one could tear space apart and travel 10,000 li in the blink of an eye. At the top of the 9 clouds, Ning Chun had no idea that his whereabouts had been discovered by the master of the 4 extremes territory and the Disaster King. Looking at the sky, he was indescribably shocked. His sword and blade had shaken away a trace of the illusion. Outside the sky, the moon and the starry sky were extremely clear. All of the light had been absorbed. However, the place closest to the sky was extremely dark. Looking back, the continent below was so far away that it was difficult to see it clearly. It was hard to imagine that for thousands of years, the sky in everyone's eyes was just a mirage. Ning Chun suppressed his shock and spread out his spiritual sense. He searched for traces of the past at the top of the 9 clouds. He believed that it wasn't just a coincidence that he had come here. There had to be some other reason. After searching for a long time, Ning Chun finally discovered something strange. Under the dusky sky, there was a slightly brighter place. Only by carefully examining it could he see that it was different from the rest. Spatial turbulence filled this abnormal sky. Ning Chun entered it with his sword and saber in hand. He was very careful. Among all the rules of heaven and earth, time and space were always the most unpredictable forces. If he was not careful, he would be sent to some unknown place by the spatial turbulence. I didn't expect you to be able to find this place. It seems I underestimated you. At this moment, a cold voice came from the void. A man stood in the void in the flowing light battle suit, his aura shaking the world. Disaster King, I'm honored to meet you here. Ning Chun was deep within the chaotic flows of space. He looked outside and calmly spoke. Don't think that just because you defeated Xian Cheng and the others that you can look down on everyone. The three disasters realm isn't a realm you can measure, snorted the Disaster King. Whether or not I can measure it isn't your concern. If you don't want to come in, you can just wait outside. Ning Chun casually replied, and then ignored him. He carefully walked through the chaotic flows of space, doing his best to avoid being sucked in. Iciness flashed through the Disaster King's eyes. He also stepped into the chaotic flows of space. Spatial energy was extremely strange. Unless one was at the peak of the three disasters realm, no one would dare to rashly touch it. As one of the three disasters, the Disaster King's strength was extraordinary. However, he still had to be extremely careful in this chaotic flow of space. The instant the two of them intersected, sword light and palm energy appeared. However, before they could even reach their bodies, they were swallowed by space. The two of them once more entered different spaces. Chapter 252. In the strange spatial turbulence, an even stranger battle continued. The Disaster King and Ning Chun's figures crossed each other 3 times, but they were never able to truly clash. Under the sky, extremely weak streaks of light shone from unknown places. If one did not look carefully, it would be very difficult to discover them. Ning Chun followed the direction of the light and approached the sky as much as possible. However, in the spatial turbulence, he did not know where he would end up with each step he took. The Disaster King was the same. He could only rely on his most primitive instincts as a cultivator to find his opponent's tracks. After crossing paths again, the Disaster King gathered his chi with a flip of his palm. Vast essence shook as he slapped out the inky sword intent in Ning Chun's hand sword. He slashed out, and in an instant he disappeared. The sword and palm collided. The palm energy devoured the sword intent, but it was once again brought into an unfamiliar space by the turbulence, disappearing without a trace. Ning Chun's intention was to approach the sky. He had no intention of fighting. He did not want to fight head-on. The Disaster King had come to take his life, so how could he give up so easily? He looked at the young figure that seemed to be right in front of him, but was actually countless spaces away. He moved his feet and chased with all his strength. In the spatial turbulence, the flow of time was clearly different from the outside world. The two people who had entered could not feel the flow of time, but several days and nights had already passed in the outside world. It seemed to be less than 3,000 meters away, But only after entering would one realize that a short distance was the end of the world, let alone 3,000 meters away. Silver spatial turbulence constantly flew around the two of them. Occasionally, there would be even more terrifying turbulent storms, whistling and rushing about. It was extremely shocking. In space, there was no place that was absolutely safe. The surroundings that seemed calm could become the center of a terrifying turbulent storm in the next moment. The turbulent streams danced about. Ning Chen's blade and sword would occasionally swing about. The feeling of the blade standing above space was extremely strange. It was as if there was nothing there, but also as if it was indestructible. Unavoidable dangers existed at all times. Even someone as strong as the Disaster King did not dare to be careless. When turbulent storms appeared, he would avoid them as much as he could. If he got lost in space, it would not be as easy to get out as imagined. Apart from the great perfection of the three disasters, no one dared to say that they could survive in the spatial turbulence forever. The two of them did not encounter each other often. Ning Chen intentionally avoided him, and his strength was far greater than before. The Disaster King had no choice but to chase after him with all his strength. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. The two of them still had not come out. The Four Extremities sent Xian Tian to investigate, but in the end, they found nothing and could only return to report. At the same time, in the earthly craftsman's manor, Jiang Exan had already been here for a month. The earthly craftsman admired the independent and hardworking habits that he had cultivated since he was young. In comparison, the little boy seemed to be more lazy. Children were always more playful. If one did not pay attention, he would run off without a trace. The matter of pulling the bellows was naturally handed over to Jiang Exan, and Jiang Exan did not have any complaints either. Aside from working, she would work hard to cultivate, and neither would interfere with the other. Ever since the eldest princess returned from the Sudden Thunder dynasty, she had visited the Earth Craftsman Manor a few times. As for why, only Li Yue herself knew. Over the past month, Li Yue had seen Jiang Exan in the Earth Craftsman Manor. At first, she didn't know what was going on, but after a long time, she gradually figured out what was going on. In the end, Jiang Exan did not know much about the ways of the world. In this regard, there was a huge gap between him and Li Yue, who had been in the imperial court for many years. Many times, he would unconsciously reveal flaws. The Earth Craftsman did not say much. In his eyes, the eldest princess of the Lihua dynasty was someone who could be trusted, apart from having some problems with her personality. There were very few things that Li Yue could not figure out. In just a few days, Jiang Exan's identity had been thoroughly investigated and deceived, and she found out everything about her. After a few more days, the two became good sisters who talked about everything. In particular, when Jiang Exan heard that the eldest princess in front of her was her master's friend, she trusted Li Yue even more. Regarding Ning Chen's past, Li Yue very quickly asked Jiang Exan about it. When she learned that he was not a spy of the otherworld as the Sacred Land had said, she subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. During this period, Li Yan also came once to personally inquire about the forging of the Weapon of Destiny. When he saw that there was an additional little girl in the Earth Craftsman Manor, a trace of curiosity appeared on his face. Li Yue whispered a few words in his ear, and only then did Li Yan nod, a strange light flashing across his eyes. Half a day later, Li Yan left. Before he left, he once again looked thoughtfully at Jiang Exan, and then left with a heavy heart. The day of forging the weapon was set to a month later. The Lihua dynasty would open the furnace and forge the Weapon of Destiny of the Lihua dynasty. Among the four great dynasties, only the Lihua dynasty did not have its own Weapon of Destiny. The dragon vein of the country was all suppressed by the Sacred Land. This was also one of the reasons why the Lihua dynasty had always been unable to break free from the Sacred Land's restraints. The concept of destiny had existed since ancient times. Although it seemed illusory, once one reached a certain level of cultivation, one would be able to experience the mysterious power that could almost affect heaven and earth. The conditions for forging the Weapon of Destiny were very strict. The Lihua dynasty had secretly prepared for nearly 100 years, and barely managed to gather all the materials. Only with the existence of this generation's earth craftsmen was there a possibility of forging the weapon. On the other hand, the matter of forging the weapon had to be kept a secret, especially not to be discovered by the sacred land. Otherwise, all previous efforts would be wasted. In the Lihua palace, Li Yan stood in the main hall and paced for a long time. His eyes flashed with struggle several times, but in the end, he steeled his heart and walked to the dragon throne to write a letter. When the person raised his head again, the struggle in Li Yan's eyes had disappeared, leaving only determination and indifference. Present, a guard walked over and knelt down. Send this letter out according to the method written on it. Remember, it must be kept a secret, especially not to let the eldest princess's people see it, Li Yan said coldly. Yes. The guard received the order, got up, took the letter and quickly left. Your Majesty, I'm afraid that doing this will hurt the eldest princess's heart. An old figure walked out and advised softly. Qin Yan's expression did not change much. He said indifferently, those who achieve great things do not bother about trifles. I will repay the favor I owe you in the future. The old man sighed softly and said, since your Majesty has already decided, I won't say anything more. With that, the old man retreated into the darkness and disappeared. In the following days, in the Earth Craftsman manor, the imperial family was secretly preparing for the forging of the weapon in a month's time. The little boy and Jiang Xian, on the other hand, were free. The two of them did not know the situation, and did not need to work every day. They only needed to focus on practicing the saber or sword. Outside the imperial city, Elderly, who was guarding the Lihua dynasty, also had a heavy heart. He maintained his usual low-profile life, and tried his best not to attract the attention of the people from the sacred land. The 100-year plan of the Lihua dynasty depended on these less than 2 months. There must not be any mistakes. The cold moon hung high in the sky, and half the night had passed. In the eldest princess manor, Li Yue still had not rested. She was also thinking about the forging of the weapon. The forging of the weapon of destiny was not something that could be done in a day or two. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, she had to think of a way to attract the attention of the sacred land elsewhere. Li Yue stood up and said, "Come in." Yes. A black-clothed figure appeared outside the door and said respectfully, "Mobilize all the spies in our hands and spread fake news about the spies of the eastern region," Li Yue said in a deep voice. Yes. The black-clothed figure received the order and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. The emperor of the Lihua dynasty and the eldest princess had used the same methods in the same day for the same purpose. However, the different methods led to a world of difference in the results. At the top of the ninth heaven, in the endless space turbulence, Ning Chun and the Disaster King had already been in it for a month. Every step they took was extremely careful, always on guard against the space storms that would suddenly appear out of nowhere. Ning Chun was not too far away from the canopy at the top of the ninth heaven. His sword and saber shook off streams of light as he continued forward. On the other side, the Disaster King was in a different space. His frown grew deeper and deeper. Although he could not feel the passage of time in the space turbulence, he could roughly guess that he had been in there for a long time. Ha! With a long shout, the Disaster King's body continued to rise, shining brilliantly. He flipped his palm and slapped the space turbulence in front of him. In the next moment, his figure swept past as he moved forward with all his might. Feeling the violent space vibrations around him, Ning Chun was careful and tried to increase his speed as much as possible. Clang! The sword and palm collided again in an unexpected encounter. The beautiful saber slashed across, creating a dazzling brilliance. The Disaster King turned sideways and flipped his palm again. The figure in front of him disappeared again. The space turbulence surged, annihilating all auras. Close by, Ning Chun suppressed the surging blood qi in his body. His expression did not change as he continued forward. Finally, after more than half a month in the outside world, the canopy at the top of the ninth heaven gradually appeared in front of him. The brilliance grew brighter and brighter, as if it was sunlight from another world. Fine cracks appeared on the beautiful saber and the green ink sword in Ning Chen's hands, especially the body of the beautiful saber, which was covered with cracks. It could shatter at any time. The two weapons were not divine weapons after all. They could not withstand the erosion of the power of space. Coupled with the fact that he had to fight with the Disaster King from time to time, they could not bear the burden anymore. The brilliance under the canopy was so familiar. Ning Chen waved his sword and gathered power. Frost drifted in the air. He shook off the illusion in front of him and looked at the scene behind the canopy. It was not the sun, nor was it the starry sky. It was a piece of scorched land. It was desolate and silent. Ascension Valley. Ning Chen was shocked. There was no mistake. It must be Ascension Valley. In the end, he attracted the heavenly tribulation and heavenly punishment here. He dragged all the half-dead Xiantian monsters to the grave with him, turning the entire Ascension Valley into a land of death. It turned out that the four extremes and the divine land of imminent land that he had been looking for so long were really here. Are you surprised? Unfortunately, it's too late. As he spoke, the Disaster King walked out. His flowing light battle armor shone brightly and was exceptionally dazzling. Ning Chen sneered. He did not panic at all. His saber and sword danced. Amidst the blue brilliance and snowflakes, the saber and sword intent rose rapidly. The ninth heaven shook, and all things flickered rapidly. Seeing that his opponent's moves were extraordinary, the Disaster King's expression turned serious. He flipped his palm and activated Vast Essence. He was on full alert. See you never. At this moment, Ning Chen's figure flashed. He entered the space turbulence and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Disaster King was stunned. He was furious. He blasted away the turbulence in front of him with a palm and quickly chased after him. Chapter 253. In the chaotic flow of space, Bai Yi's figure flashed, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Now that he had seen what he wanted to see, Ning Chen's path no longer followed any pattern. After 10 days, the Disaster King was unable to find any trace of him. At the border between the northern and eastern regions, space rippled, and Bai Yi walked out. Ning Chen looked at his surroundings. For a moment, he did not know where he was. With a move of his feet, he rushed towards a nearby city. At the peak of the 9 heavens, the Disaster King appeared, but he was not at his original location. He was thousands of miles away. Disaster King, return quickly. Without the obstruction of the chaotic flow of space, the master of the 4 extreme realms' order finally reached the Disaster King's ears. The order was very urgent, as if there was something important that needed to be said. The Disaster King didn't hesitate. He turned into a streak of light and flew away. Within the Longevity Hall, the Disaster King returned. Multicolored light gathered in the air, and an illusory figure condensed. Disaster King, what was the result? He escaped. Furthermore, the border between the 2 realms has been exposed, said the Disaster King gloomily. The master of the 4 extreme realms was silent for a moment before slowly saying, "In that case, that child can't be allowed to live. Our spies have reported that they've found the whereabouts of the general's daughter. I'll send Xiantian to help, as well as Yu Yangtian, Xingyun and Buyu. This time, we have to eliminate that child no matter what." The Disaster King frowned slightly. Isn't that making a mountain out of a molehill? Xiantian was a 5th tribulation expert, and even Yu Yangtian, Xingyun, and Buyu were at the 3rd tribulation. Adding on the fact that he was on the side, it was far too absurd for them to just deal with a 3rd tribulation expert. The master of the 4 extreme realms shook his head. It's fine. The most important thing is to make sure nothing goes wrong. Although the Disaster King didn't agree, he still nodded. Once that was done, the master of the 4 extreme realms figure rapidly vanished. As the final trace of multicolored light faded away, the hall returned to its former calm. Only after the master of the 4 extreme realms left did a black-robed figure walk in. The Disaster King glanced at him and gravely said, "How is it? Have you found Ming Xuanji's whereabouts?" "Reporting to the palace master, there's still no news," replied the person kneeling on the ground. "A bunch of trash." "Keep looking," said the Disaster King. "Yes." The black-clothed figure stood up and quickly walked out of the hall. The Disaster King's eyes flickered with cold light. This Meng Xuanji was clearly suspicious of the Long Life Temple and the 4 extreme holy lands. She refused to show herself, testing his patience. However, his patience was limited. When his patience ran out, the entire continent of the 9 clouds would be buried because of her stupidity. Ning Chun stayed in the city at the border of the Northern Territory and the Eastern Territory for half a day. Finally, he understood where he had been thrown to after walking out of the space turbulence. The Disaster King shouldn't be able to catch up. There was no sense of time or direction in the chaotic flow of space, so the chances of the 2 of them appearing in the same place was almost negligible. The border between the 2 realms had been made clear. Ning Chun wanted to continue looking for Meng Xuanji, but after hearing the rumors about him and his senior's whereabouts, he couldn't help but stop. Something was wrong. Ning Chun's mind was clear, and he quickly noticed the abnormality. In the 4 extremities, no one would risk offending the sacred land to spread false information to help him and his seniors. It was impossible for his senior to do such a thing. He had thought about it before, but he hadn't had the time to do it. Now someone had done it first. The only explanation was that this person needed to use false information to attract the sacred land's attention. Ning Chun walked on the bustling streets of the city, quickly thinking about what was going on. The Disaster King had just parted with him, so it was easy for him to distinguish the truth of the news and not fall for it. The sacred land and the Eternal Life Hall were definitely connected. In other words, the sacred land wouldn't believe these rumors. The person who spread these rumors naturally didn't know about this, and they also had a grudge with the sacred land. The target was actually very easy to confirm: the Lihua dynasty. Thinking of this, Ning Chun's eyes narrowed slightly. If he guessed correctly, the Lihua dynasty must have made some big move that they didn't want the sacred land to know about. He had a decent relationship with Li Yue, and this woman could be considered trustworthy. He wondered if there was a need to go over and warn her. Perhaps he could take this opportunity to ask the earthly blacksmith to help him repair the sword in his hand, and at the same time take a look at Jiang Xian's cultivation. In the Lihua Valley in the north of the imperial city of the Lihua dynasty, the weapon forging had already started for more than 10 days. Li Yan, Li Yue, Elderly, and a royal consecrator were all looking at the earthly blacksmith on the weapon forging table with serious expressions. Sweat mixed with fire splashed everywhere with the sound of hammering. The earthly blacksmith's expression was unprecedentedly focused. Every hammering was accurate to the extreme. This was the result of day after day of practice. There were no shortcuts. Whether it was forging ordinary weapons or divine weapons, the craftsman's skill was the most crucial factor in determining the quality. The outstanding craftsmen in the sacred land were passed down from generation to generation. However, the Lihua dynasty only had one earthly blacksmith in the past few hundred years. This was also why the Lihua royal family was so anxious to forge their own weapon of destiny. In the earthly blacksmith manor, the snow had stopped not long ago. In the courtyard, the little boy and Jiang Xian were practicing seriously. Xiaoyu was young and made many mistakes easily. Every time this happened, Jiang Xian would stop and patiently explain to her without any impatience. Da-da-da. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. A man dressed as a guard stopped the carriage in front of the earthly blacksmith manor. After showing his token, he entered the manor. When the little boy and Jiang Xian saw the person who had come, they were puzzled. "Miss Jiang Xian, Her Highness the eldest princess invites you," the guard said respectfully as he handed over a letter from Li Yue. When Jiang Xian heard the guard call her name, she was startled at first. However, when she heard the words eldest princess, she calmed down. The handwriting on the letter was undoubtedly Li Yue's. After reading the letter, Jiang Xian no longer had any doubts. She said a few words to the little boy and left with the guard. The carriage was already waiting outside the manor. Jiang Xian stepped onto it. The guard started the carriage and immediately rushed towards the south. The carriage quickly left the imperial city and the Lihua Valley to the north of the imperial city. A faint fragrance filled the air in the carriage. Jiang Xian quickly lost consciousness. Soon, she completely lost consciousness. The carriage did not stop at all. No one knew where it was going. Night fell. In Qingli City, in the eldest princess manor, a white figure walked out. His spiritual sense scanned the entire manor, but he did not find the person he was looking for. Ningchen frowned slightly. He moved his feet and rushed towards the west. In the earthly craftsman manor, Ningchen appeared. When he found that the little boy was the only one left in the manor, he immediately had a bad feeling. Xiaoyu. Ningchen came to the little boy's room and woke him up. Big brother Ning. The little boy was not asleep yet. When he woke up and saw the familiar figure in front of him, his little face lit up, and he called out happily. Where's your master and Jiang Xian? Why are you alone in the manor? Ningchen quickly asked. Master has already left the manor for more than 10 days. I don't know where he went. Sister Jiang Xian was just invited by the eldest princess people today. She should be in the eldest princess manor right now. The little boy said honestly. Oh no. Ningchen's expression changed. In a flash he disappeared. The earthly craftsman manor was located in the most remote part of the imperial city. People rarely came here, especially after the heavy snow last night. A thick layer of snow had accumulated on the ground, making the 2 carriage tracks outside the manor very clear. Ningchen followed the tracks for a long time, until he could no longer distinguish them. However, he also confirmed the direction the carriage had left in. In the Lihua Valley, Li Yan's expression was unusually cold. He looked at the weapon of destiny that was gradually taking shape on the weapon forging table, and his eyes kept flashing with brilliance. After forging this weapon, and finding a way to transfer the hundreds of years of destiny in the dragon vein into it, the Lihua dynasty would be one step closer to breaking free from the control of the sacred grounds. Those who wanted to achieve great things could not be constrained by small details. As long as the weapon of destiny could be successfully forged, it was worth sacrificing anyone. On the side, Li Yue did not know that the brother she trusted the most had secretly made the most heartless decision. In order to successfully forge the weapon, he had taken the initiative to give Jiang Xian to the 4 sacred grounds. On the weapon forging table, green jade wood, blazing sun iron, purple marked divine gold, moon rock, and dozens of other rare divine materials had been perfectly merged together after being hammered thousands of times by the black gold giant hammer. The divine materials of various colors were mixed together. In the end, the weapon of destiny returned to its original white color. It was sparkling and translucent. It was very unique. The earthly craftsman's expression became more and more serious. As a craftsman, he only wanted to forge the most perfect weapon in his life. Without a doubt, this was his last and only chance. To the south of the imperial city, a white figure flashed past. Gradually, Ningchen sensed a familiar aura, and he sped up. He had forcefully opened up Jiang Xian's sea of qi with the life scroll, so he was extremely sensitive to the little girl's aura. As long as it was not too far away, he would more or less be able to sense it. In front of Half Moon Mountain, Ningchen caught up with the carriage. Sensing that something was wrong with Jiang Xian's aura, he slashed the carriage open from 300 meters away and quickly rushed up. The guard's expression changed greatly. He did not expect someone to catch up to him. Just as he was about to move, a sword was pointed at his throat. Whose order is it? Ningchen's face was incomparably ashen as he asked coldly. At this moment, the guard's eyes quickly dimmed. He would rather break his own meridians than reveal anything. Seeing that the guard was about to die, Ningchen did not waste any more time. He carried Jiang Xian on his back and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a bloody blade of light fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground with a boom. The figure that approached was dressed in blood-red clothes. His red hair danced in the wind. He was like a blade god that had descended to the world. Return to the sacred grounds with me. I can't do it. Ningchen clenched his right hand, and the green ink flew into his hand. His sword intent vibrated, shaking the heaven and earth. The blade and the sword clashed again. 100 miles away, the Disaster King and the others who had been waiting for a long time did not see the promised figure. They were puzzled. 5 extremely powerful auras flew up and looked into the distance. There was a powerful enemy in front of him, and there was an encirclement behind him. Ning Chen did not know that he was at the edge of danger. He faced the bloody blade of light with a single sword. Wan Fengchen also did not know that the Disaster King and the others were 100 miles away. This killing plot against Ning Chen had not yet begun, but it had unexpectedly appeared earlier. Chapter 254. Under the half-moon mountain, chaotic wind dust, who had been searching for Ning Chen, finally found the person he was looking for. His flowing light blood blade shone brightly, and he no longer held back. After retrieving his saber, the Saint Child of the Four Poles was even more powerful. Every move he made was far more oppressive than before. Ning Chen carried General Xian on his back and faced the enemy with a broken sword. Although he had some misgivings in his heart, he still did not fall into a disadvantageous position. The battle between the geniuses stirred up snowflakes that were hundreds of feet tall, blocking the view of the crowd and preventing them from seeing the battle clearly. Amidst the snowstorm, the flowing light and the snowy light constantly collided, each displaying their sharpness. No one was willing to take even half a step back. Earth Scroll, 1000 Earth Revolutions. The scroll of Earth appeared once more, causing the Earth to churn. Large patches of Earth split apart, rose up, and closed towards the center. It was like the scene of the end of the world, shaking the heavens and earth. Seeing this, Luan Fengchen's blood blade shone brightly, and he also used his ultimate skill. A red light flashed, and thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky. The two moves collided, causing the earth to crumble and the mountains to crumble. The light of the sword and the saber clashed once again. It was abnormally intense. 100 miles away, the Disaster King and the others sensed the intense Zhen-Qi fluctuations in the distance. Their figures flickered as they rushed over. In the fire canyon, Li Yan's mind spun. According to the plan, the daughter of the Jiang clan should have been delivered to the people of the Holy Land. With this woman around, the sacred lands would spend more of their energy on finding a way to lure Ning Chen out, which would greatly reduce the risk of them being discovered. The sound of the hammer hitting the weapon of destiny echoed throughout the canyon. It was the 13th day, and the final moment of success was not far away. The original white color was so dazzling. It flickered with a powerful aura within the inky blue Li fire. Before the artifact was completed, there was already an unusual pressure circulating about. Li Yue looked at the weapon forging table, and her right eyebrow twitched uncontrollably. A sense of uneasiness rose in her heart, but after thinking about it carefully, she didn't find anything wrong, so she didn't pay it much mind. In front of the Half-Moon Mountain, the battle was still ongoing. On Ning Chen's back, Jiang Xian was still unconscious. The medicine of the Li Fire royal family was extraordinary. Even martial artists could not contend against it. Wan Fengchen's expression was cold, and his red hair fluttered in the wind. The blade in his hand became sharper and sharper as he pressed forward, determined to bring this person back to the four extreme holy lands. Ning Chen was worried about his safety and didn't want to fight for a long time. He swung his sword and pushed the former away. Frost surged, and the love formula reappeared in the world. However, right at this moment, a powerful palm strike came from the distant horizon, illuminating the heavens and the earth. Ning Chen was startled. He pulled back his sword to block the attack. With a loud bang, he was pushed back a few steps. The blood in his body was boiling violently. The auras of the six figures that descended reached the sky. Their terrifying might blotted out the sky and covered the sun. It was extremely shocking. The Calamity King, Xian Tian, Yuyang Tian, Xing Yun, and Buyu were all experts above the third tribulation of the Xiantian realm. In fact, Xian Tian and the Calamity King had already reached the fifth tribulation and the three calamities realm. The Disaster King glanced at General Hart on the former's back and sneered. I was wondering where I went wrong. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me. Holy Son, Yuyang Tian, Xing Yun, and Buyu saluted respectfully. Luan Fengchen frowned as he looked at the four people in front of him and asked, "Why are you here?" "The Realm Master has ordered us to assist the Disaster King in killing the spies of the Eastern Divine Prefecture." Xian Tian took half a step forward and answered. Luan Fengchen coldly harumphed and waved his hand to put away his bloodlight blade. 5 against 1. and one of the three disasters, they were truly willing to do so. We'll meet again if you're still alive. Luan Fengchen glanced at Ning Chun, who was surrounded by the five, and turned to leave. Yu Yangtian and the others didn't stop him. They all knew the Holy Sun's personality. Even if the Realm Master was here, he wouldn't be able to do anything. The sun set in the west and a cold wind blew. The Holy Land's encirclement had begun once more. Ning Chen's expression became serious. He tore off a piece of cloth from his clothes and tied the unconscious General Hart to his back. Silver light rose from his azure ink sword, and frost rapidly condensed. Although he wasn't sure if Li Yue had really betrayed him, it definitely couldn't be a coincidence that the Calamity King and so many people from the Holy Land had appeared together. Kill! Yu Yangtian's halberd was the first to attack. The humiliation of He Shihai being tricked was still fresh in his mind. Every time he thought of it, he would be filled with rage. Bang! The halberd and sword clashed. The ground beneath Ning Chen's feet suddenly split open, and a huge gully continuously extended hundreds of meters. Moving clouds and setting rain raised their swords at the same time. The two swords joined forces and sword light scattered, forming an impenetrable sword net. They joined forces and attacked. Seeing this, Ning Chen pushed Yu Yangtian away with his sword. Snowflakes surged as he fought against the two swords. The three swords clashed. In an instant, dozens of moves had already passed. The dense sword net couldn't stop the swift and fierce sword aura. A sword swept past, and both of their bodies turned red at the same time. The halberd swept past again with the power to split open a mountain. Ning Chen took half a step back and waved his sword to block. Another shocking explosion sounded. Crack! With a clear crisp sound, the crack on the sword extended another half an inch. Ning Chen's eyes focused. His left hand grasped the air, and a beautiful saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out, and the beautiful saber light chased after the soul. Yu Yangtian's heart turned cold. He quickly retreated, but he was still half a step too late. With a ripping sound, the armor on his chest was cut open, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Xing Yun Buyu, and then a battle formation. The sword of cloud and rain was exquisite and long, and extremely complicated. Yu Yangtian suppressed his injuries and also stood up. The halberd's power was impressive and abnormally domineering. The three of them took turns to fight. The sword and halberd clashed. Ning Chen was fighting 1 against 3, but there was no fear on his face. He waved his saber and sword and fought like a god. Qing Mo and the beautiful saber were waved in the last light of the setting sun. Blood was constantly spilling out. 3 against 1. They couldn't gain the slightest advantage. When the snow is about to fall, the sword will snow for 3,000 miles. The sword of pleasure caused the snowflakes on the ground to fly up into the sky. Although the frost spread in the wind and snow, the three's moves suddenly stagnated. The beautiful saber was dazzling, and a waterfall of blood bloomed again. Xiantian, seeing that the battle was not going well, the Disaster King glanced at the man, who hadn't moved at all, and reminded him. I can't help it. Xiantian sighed in his heart. He waved his hand, and an ancient sword appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Hao's sword was unsheathed. His figure moved along with it, and he instantly entered the battle. Clang! In the intense battle, an unusually clear sound of swords clashing rang out. Qing Mo and Hao's sword clashed. The powerful sword intent immediately clashed violently and scattered in all directions. With a swoosh, Ning Chen's left face was slashed by the sword qi. As his black hair fluttered, a bloody scar appeared. Yu Yangtian, Xing Yun, and Buyu immediately strengthened their attacks and encirclement. They were determined to kill the person in front of them completely. Xiantian entered the battle, and his attacks instantly became several times stronger. Ning Chen was the first to show signs of weakness. At this moment, Jiang Xian, who had been unconscious all this while, slowly opened her eyes. She felt a familiar aura beside her, and subconsciously shouted, Master! Ning Chen was distracted for a moment, and the beautiful saber in his left hand broke. With a swish, blood dyed his clothes red. The edge of Hao's sword was unusually sharp. In addition, the beautiful saber was already severely damaged in the spatial turbulence earlier. At this moment, It finally couldn't withstand the power of the battle and broke. Snow in July. Ningchen shouted. Qing Yemo and Yang Shui waved, and countless sword intents spread out. Yu Yang Tian and the others were sent flying for more than 10 steps. The corners of their mouths were dyed red. Xian Tian took 3 steps back and suppressed his trembling aura. A strange expression flashed across his face. Could it be that all the swords of the divine land were this strong? Although the young man in front of him was still far from the blue-robed man's cultivation in the sword, it was already at an unimaginable level for his age. What kind of divine land could nurture such an outstanding swordsman? For the first time, Xian Tian had a trace of yearning for the eastern region's divine land. For someone who loved the sword and was obsessed with it, the best thing was to meet a better opponent. On Ning Chen's back, Jiang Xian also recovered her senses. She recalled what had happened. Seeing the encirclement in front of her, she immediately understood that her master had summoned a killing trap to save her. Master! Jiang Xian looked at the eye-catching bloodstains on her master's white clothes, and tears flashed in her eyes. It was all her fault for trusting others so easily. That was why she had brought so much trouble to her master. Hold on tight. Master will bring you to kill our way out. Ningchen said softly. He swung his sword several times, and his figure flashed as he rushed toward Half Moon Mountain. Want to leave? Umph. At this moment, the Disaster King who had been observing the battle finally moved. He used vast essence-gathering palm, and used his full strength to move the power of heaven and earth. In an instant, all living things mourned, and gods and ghosts were frightened. Earth scroll, earth destruction, mountain destruction. Feeling the terrifying aura behind him, Ningchen stopped and pulled back his sword. The mountain shook, and a powerful sword intent rushed out of the ground and collided with the incoming palm energy. With a loud bang, the earth scroll was unable to dissolve the 3 calamities palm energy. Ningchen's mouth was dyed red, and he retreated several steps. His figure turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the distance. Chase! The Disaster King coldly shouted. His figure flashed, and he quickly chased after Ningchen. 4 figures rushed forward, and Ningchen, who had not gone too far, was quickly blocked by a sword. The 2 swords collided and sparks flew everywhere. The light of the divine halberd rose behind Ningchen. Ningchen was worried about his safety, so he turned his hand back and condensed a sword finger. With a clang, the halberd light was knocked away. 1 sword against 4, and the battle cries were endless. Even if the person in the battle had an unparalleled fighting spirit, under the intense consumption of true essence and blood qi, he gradually showed signs of exhaustion. His plain white clothes were now stained with blood. Some belonged to his opponent, and some belonged to him. In Ningchen's hand, the green ink sword had also reached its limit. It could break apart at any time. Seeing her master getting more and more injured, Jiang Xian's tears kept falling from her eyes. She felt as if her heart was being cut by a knife. Master, put me down and leave first. Come back and save me if you have the chance in the future. Don't say stupid things. Master will definitely bring you out of this alive. Ningchen reprimanded her tiredly. He fought and ran at the same time. He leaned to the side and dodged the halberd light in front of him. He waved his sword with his right hand to block the tip of the clear sword. Then he saw the cloud and rain swords coming at him. Just as he was about to use his power, he felt his blood and qi stagnate, and his hand movements immediately slowed down. The sword finger knocked away the rain swords, but it could not block the cloud swords. A waterfall of blood bloomed, and dyed Jiang Xian's eyes red. Blood and tears covered her young face. Right at this moment, another powerful palm energy flew over. Ningchen subconsciously waved his sword to block it. In the blink of an eye, his sword was broken, and he was sent flying. Pfff. Vomiting a mouthful of blood, Ningchen stood up. His consciousness was in a daze. On his back, Jiang Xian was also sent flying by this terrifying palm, and fell to the side. Jiang Xian. At the edge of the half-moon cliff, it was hard to find a way out. Ningchen looked at Jiang Xian, who was not far away. Just as he was about to take a step forward, he suddenly staggered. He had already reached his limit. Kill! The Disaster King gave the order without showing any mercy. Yu Yang Tian, and the others quickly surrounded him, wanting to end this battle without any suspense. At the edge of the cliff, Jiang Xian crawled up with difficulty. Her small face was now covered in blood and dust. After being washed by her tears, she looked like a little kitten. "Master, Jiang Xian cannot implicate you anymore." With a brilliant smile and a final wish, Jiang Xian's body fell backwards, and she quickly fell down the endless cliff. "Jiang Xian." Ning Chen's pupil shrank. He reached out to grab her, but it was already too late. He was unable to use his qi, and his master could only watch as the little girl, who loved to cry and laugh, for several months slowly disappeared into the cliff. The figure kneeling on the ground did not move at all. It was abnormally quiet. It was so heavy that it made everyone present feel a strong sense of unease. Ha ha ha. In the next moment, an indescribable wild laughter rang out from Half Moon Mountain. Thunder roared, wind howled, and snowflakes appeared. Amidst the blood that filled the sky, a dazzling green sword slowly rose from Ning Chen's body. As the bloody light flowed, a terrifying might exploded. Chapter 255. The appearance of knowing destiny caused the heaven and earth to tremble. The magnificent sword intent spread out and flattened everything within 1,000 zhang radius. Yu Yang Tian, Xing Yun, and Buyu were the first to bear the brunt of the sword intent. Xian Tian waved the clear sword in his hand and blocked the sword intent. With a bang, he retreated a few steps, and the corner of his mouth was dyed red. Humph! The Disaster King turned his palm to block the attack. However, the vigorous sword intent could not be completely dissipated. He still retreated half a step. "Buyu!" Not far away, Xing Yin shouted. A huge hole appeared on Buyu's chest. The sword intent wreaked havoc. In the blink of an eye, all the vitality in his body dissipated. Yu Yang Tian and Xian Tian also looked over, and their pupils constricted. Seeing his comrade die, Xian Tian felt a pain in his heart. His clear sword shone brightly, and carried the sharpest killing intent for the first time. The plain-clothed figure at the edge of the cliff was covered in blood. His eyes were dim, and he had lost half of his consciousness. Only the sword intent around him kept vibrating. Thunder, wind, and ice, the three original auras roared and galloped. Sandwiched within the sword intent, the power was shocking and made the bright moonlight lose its color. The clear sword was extremely fast, and arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. With a clang, it was blocked by the Knowing Destiny sword. The green sword body had blood-colored patterns flowing on it. At the moment of collision, a sword intent fused with the original aura quickly spread out. With the original aura being restrained, Xian Tian's aura suddenly stagnated. His body flew out and landed on the ground. He retreated a dozen steps. Yu Yang Tian and Xing Yin also rushed forward. The halberd light and the sword light intersected and fought against the strong enemy again. The Knowing Destiny sword blocked the two attacks. Soon after, the sword aura spread out and the two were sent flying again. Xian Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the young man, who had lost half of his consciousness, but was still unshakable. His expression was extremely serious. Yu Yang Tian and Xing Yin suppressed their injuries and carried the anger of their comrade's death. The divine halberd and cloud sword were filled with killing intent. Xian Tian waved his hand, and the clear sword shone again. He also rushed forward. The Knowing Destiny sword was waved again and again. Block, slash, stab. The most basic moves. The swordsman's consciousness was almost gone. Only the sword chi was flowing with the sword. Clang. It was unknown how many times the sword and halberd had clashed. With a crisp sound of metal shattering, the divine halberd broke. Amidst the dazzling red blood, Yu Yang Tian's right arm flew off, blood splattering all over the sky. Ugh! Yu Yang Tian landed on the ground and retreated a few steps. He barely managed to stop himself as he spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the rocks in front of him red. At the same time, Xing Yunlin's sword intent surged. His cloud sword was as resplendent as the moon as he attacked with all his strength. "Be careful," Xian Tian hurriedly reminded. His clear sword shone brightly and turned into a stream of light to quickly follow. The blood pattern in the Knowing Destiny sword flowed. The three swords connected, and the sword aura leaned against each other. The clear sword blocked the tip of the sword, and the cloud sword continued to move forward. The moment it entered the body, blood splattered everywhere. Xian Tian took 3 steps back, and his expression changed. Amidst the blood light, the knowing destiny sword slashed out. The dazzling sword light flashed, and a horrifying sword wound appeared from Xian Yun's left chest to his right rib. Blood gushed out. Xing Yunlin. Xian Tian waved his sword and 3 sword lights shot out. His body flashed as he grabbed the heavily injured Xing Yunlin and retreated 300 meters away. The clear sword's light was extremely powerful. It was less than 3 meters away, and it was extremely fast. The knowing destiny sword blocked 2 of them, but it could not block the third. The sharp sword light passed through his body and dyed his clothes red again. He did not retreat, nor did he groan in pain. He was already on the verge of losing consciousness. It's all over. Outside the battle, the Disaster King coldly snorted. He grasped the best opportunity and moved. Vast origin condensed in his palm and black light gathered. An incomparably ferocious aura once again appeared in the world. The figure at the edge of the cliff had his black hair dyed red. He did not move at all. Blood continued to flow on the tip of his sword. He did not move at all. At this moment of crisis, an extremely dazzling golden light streaked across the sky, instantly arriving at the battlefield. Its sharp chi was extremely shocking. The sudden attack made the Disaster King's heart tremble. He turned his sword palm around and blocked the incoming attack. With a loud bang, the mountain collapsed and the world shook. A beautiful figure instantly entered the battle. She grabbed the unconscious Ning Chun and turned into a stream of light that rapidly flew away. Meng Xuanji. The Disaster King waved his hand to knock away the falling mountain rocks. As he watched the 2 disappear, his complexion became extremely ugly. Seeing that the person he had surrounded was rescued, Xian Tian silently put away his sword. He walked over to the dead Buyu and carefully carried him on his back. He said, "Xing Yunlin, let's go." Xing Yunlin reluctantly nodded. He dragged his heavily injured body and silently followed. Not too far away, Yu Yangtian hesitated for a moment. In the end, he picked up his broken divine halberd and left with them. The Disaster King ignored them. His figure flashed, and he quickly chased after the 2. On Half Moon Mountain, a cold wind blew. After the 3 of them left, a figure appeared. He walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Then, without any hesitation, he jumped down the cliff. Jiang Xian's face flashed past so quickly that no one could see it clearly. Only the familiar leaning moon saber reflected a flash of brilliance in the night, and it was bone-chilling. Below the fire valley, the hammering sounds became more and more frequent. The forging of the weapon of destiny had reached the final critical moment. In just a few hours it would be complete. Li Youwei's beautiful face no longer had the seductive smile of the past. Her expression was grave as she waited for the weapon to be completed. To the side, Li Yin frowned when he saw that the messenger had yet to return. A trace of unease flashed through his heart. He did not know what had gone wrong. "Elder Chu, go take a look," Li Yin said softly to the old man beside him. "Yes." The old man nodded. His figure flashed, and he instantly left the valley. "Brother, is something the matter?" Li Yue asked with a trace of suspicion. "It's nothing. Just a small matter," Li Yin replied. Li Yue nodded and did not ask any more questions. She turned her gaze and continued to look at the weapon of destiny in the fire valley with unusual concentration. Half a month later, Meng Xuanji put Ning Chen down beside a stream 3,000 miles away from Shangxi. Her hands drew a series of complicated seals. With a flash of light, the complete separation and reunion death seal entered Ning Chen's body. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. After doing all this, Meng Xuanji turned her palm and condensed her qi. She activated her mighty True Yuan and quickly healed Ning Chen's injuries. "Ugh!" Ning Chen grunted painfully. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The aura around him was extremely chaotic. The force of the halberd and palm kept filling his meridians, resisting the external True Yuan. Meng Xuanji's eyes narrowed. She activated her qi and suppressed the chaotic aura with all her might. Golden phoenix blood flowed through his beating heart. After passing through his meridians, it returned to his heart. It kept repeating and quickly repaired Ning Chen's severely injured body. An hour later, Meng Xuanji stopped. She looked at the person in front of her and quietly waited for him to wake up. The bright moon moved to the west. There was not much time left for the night. Ning Chen finally opened his eyes beside the stream. 3 different kinds of light flashed and disappeared into the depths of his eyes. Meng Xuanji, seeing the woman in front of him, Ning Chen's eyes flashed. Just as he was about to speak, he immediately felt that something was wrong with his body. The familiar aura of the separation and reunion death seal was many times stronger this time. Your life is in my hands now. Can you tell me your true identity? Meng Xuanji asked indifferently. Eastern Divine Prefecture, Great Xiajiming Marquis, Ning Chen said slowly. The sacred land said that the Eastern Divine Prefecture intended to invade the 4 extremes. Is it true? Meng Xuanji narrowed her eyes and asked. You're just confusing the truth, Ning Chen replied. I want to hear the truth, Meng Xuanji said seriously. Ning Chen seriously told her the truth, including what he had seen at the peak of the 9 heavens. Peak of the 9 heavens? Meng Xuanji frowned. I will personally verify what you say. If you're lying, then even if we're thousands of miles apart, the separation and reunion death seal in your body will make you pay the price. After she finished speaking, Meng Xuanji took a step forward. Her robe fluttered as she ascended into the sky. Be careful of the Disaster King and the Master of the 4 extremes. If you don't want the 2 realms to go to war, then you can't let the golden feathertail fall into their hands, Ning Chen reminded her. Meng Xuanji didn't reply. She disappeared in the first rays of the morning sun. Next to the stream, Ning Chen's expression gradually turned cold. He looked to the east, his killing intent sharp. Elder Chu returned to Li Yan and whispered a few words into his ear, causing the latter to unconsciously frown. Let's not worry about that for now. Once the forging is complete, we'll discuss it further, said Li Yan. There were less than 4 hours left. Soon, the Lihua dynasty's plan would succeed. Elder Chu nodded and stood to the side cautiously waiting. Within the Lihua imperial city, a white-robed figure descended from the sky. Her spiritual sense filled the entire imperial city, and her powerful aura shocked all the martial artists present. Ning Chen was searching for Li You's figure. At this moment, the knowing destiny sword trembled intensely, as if it had sensed something. Within Lihua Valley, a pure white saber was completely formed on the forging table. The earth blacksmith's tired eyes burned with passion. This was the most glorious masterpiece of his life. He had forged countless weapons in his life, and he was especially skilled in sabers and swords. However, he had already forged a perfect sword. He wouldn't forge another one in his life. The moment the saber was completed, thunderclouds suddenly appeared in the sky, blocking out the sun. The entire sky darkened. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Elder Chu and Elder Li gathered their chi together, blocking the heavenly tribulation. The divine weapon floating in the air emitted a shocking aura. The saber had been fused with over 10 kinds of divine materials. It was pure white and flawless. It was so sharp that no one dared to look directly at it. Haha! Seeing that his karmic weapon had finally succeeded, Li Yan couldn't conceal his wild joy. Finally, he would become the #1 person in the Lihua dynasty's history. On the side, Li You's eyes also flashed with gratification. After working so hard for so long, the Lihua dynasty had finally taken the most important step. However, at this moment, a figure stained with blood slowly walked over. The knowing destiny sword in her hand trembled more and more violently. The blood in the green was exceptionally dazzling. The divine weapon in the air was also affected and began to hum. With the green jade as the core, the twin weapons were connected, and their light soared into the sky. Seeing this person, Li Yan's smile instantly vanished. He couldn't understand why this person would appear here. Chapter 256. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and the bloodstains were dazzling. The figure walking over was filled with killing intent, shocking everyone present. Li Yue immediately sensed that something was wrong. She stepped forward and blocked his path. Unexpectedly, a pair of emotionless hands arrived in an instant and locked onto the woman's delicate neck. His eyes were as cold as ice, threatening to take one's soul away. The murderous intent that filled the sky condensed in the void. An ancient giant beast manifested. A mutated rock roared towards the sky, its momentum shaking the heavens. At the same time, thunder rolled in the horizon, turning into a raging torrent that descended. Something happened to Jiangxin. Do you know? The voice was excessively calm, but Li Yue felt the aura of death. Under the lightning, the cold gaze was so unfamiliar. It was completely different from the man and her impression of him. On the forging table, the craftsman trembled when he heard this. He looked at the young man in disbelief. How could this be? It wasn't me, Li Yue said with difficulty. Then who do you think it was? The calm voice didn't contain any belief or disbelief. There was only coldness. This was her last chance. If she answered incorrectly, she would die. The calmness in the midst of extreme anger was only because of a trace of friendship in the past. However, compared to Jiangxin's life and death, this bit of friendship could only be explained in one sentence. A person suddenly flashed through Li Yue's mind. She immediately revealed a look of disbelief. How could the person she trusted the most be him? The final explanation was about to come out of her mouth, but she swallowed it back down. Li Yue was filled with regret and disappointment. The brother who had protected and supported her since childhood had betrayed her trust this time. You don't have an explanation? Killing intent flowed through Ning Chen's eyes. He extended his right hand, and the knowing destiny sword rapidly spun into his hand. Ning Chen, have mercy, the craftsman urgently shouted. Let her go. That letter was forged by my people. It has nothing to do with Yue, said Li Yan indifferently. Ning Chen released his left hand, and Li Yue fell to the ground powerlessly. Although she wasn't injured, she was suppressed by the strong killing intent, and couldn't summon any strength. No. Li Yue reached out to stop him, but she could only pull on the corner of his clothes. She couldn't stop him at all. Elder Li and Elder Chu blocked the front. They were on full alert, and their expressions were extremely grave. One was in the middle stage of the third tribulation, while the other was in the peak stage of the second tribulation. The two most powerful consecrators of the Li Fire imperial family worked together to protect the emperor. Little brother Ning, for the sake of our past friendship, everything can be discussed, Old Li quickly said from his wheelchair. Sentiments? Heh. Ning Chen smiled coldly and walked forward step by step. Amidst the cold wind, the killing intent around him intensified. In the canyon, the rock's cry shook the sky, as if it was going to swallow the sky. Chu Jiang, quickly take his majesty away, shouted Elder Li when he saw Chu Jiang's killing intent. Chu Jiang did not waste any more time. He walked to Li Yan's side and was about to leave with him. At this time, Li Yan also sensed that something was wrong. He angrily said, What are you afraid of? Can't the two of you beat him alone? Chu Jiang didn't have time to explain, as he sped away with Li Yan. Only he and Elder Li, who had reached the Khanate stage, could feel how terrifying the young man before him was. They were no longer on the same level. Even his will to resist was shaken. Without my permission, no one is allowed to leave today. Raising his hand, sword intent surged. The rock let out a long cry, and its wings trembled. A terrifying killing intent pressed down. Boundless sword intent spiraled out, turning into clouds that filled the sky. Chu Jiang was shaken. He had no choice but to turn back. But the sound of swords falling filled the air. Everything had been destroyed. The power of just one move shocked everyone. How could there be such a powerful youth in this world? Elder Li didn't dare hesitate any longer. He was the first to attack, giving the two of them a chance to escape. Since you helped me forge my sword in the past, I'll spare your life for today's offense. Ning Chen's merciless words were the last bit of mercy. He moved around Elder Li and arrived behind him in a single step. His merciful sword didn't slash down. Instead, it instantly arrived in front of Li Yan and Chu Jiang. His sword finger condensed into frost, and his sword broke through Li Yan's qi. Chu Jiang, who was beside Li Yan, didn't even have time to react. By the time he regained his senses, his eyes were already covered in blood. Ugh! With a long groan of extreme pain, Li Yan's sea of qi was instantly broken. Chaotic genuine qi spilled out from every part of his body. Blood spurted out and splattered all over the sky. Chu Jiang was startled. He raised his hand to slap Ning Chun, but he was sent flying by a single finger. Swish! At this moment, a white saber light flashed behind him. It was bright and powerful. It was shocking to the extreme. Ning Chun's eyes turned cold. He leaned to the side and swung his sword. With a clang, he blocked the saber light behind him. Elderly, who was sitting in a wheelchair, held his karmic weapon. He used all his cultivation to activate his divine weapon, doing his best to save his master. The pure white saber was dazzling. Its sharpness was close to the golden feather centipede. My mercy to you isn't the right to let you be impudent. Back down, shouted Ning Chun coldly. The life-knowing sword in Ning Chun's hand blossomed with a brilliant light. It sent the old man flying. The divine weapon that flew out of his hand fell to the side and buzzed incessantly. Due to the huge difference in strength, even the support of the divine weapon was useless. Li Yan, who was lying in a pool of blood, looked at the two consecrators who had been defeated, his mouth open, but he could no longer speak due to the pain. If he had known this would happen, would he have made the decision back then? The emperor asked his heart. His heart was at a loss. Ning Chun waved his hand and grabbed the divine weapon. He looked at the figure on the ground and said coldly, "Is this why you betrayed your heart?" Seeing the divine weapon fall into the hands of the person in front of him, a hint of struggle flashed in Li Yan's eyes. However, his crippled body couldn't move. He could only watch helplessly as the divine weapon fell. Sigh. On the weapon forging table, the earth craftsman sighed softly and didn't say another word. He had failed to live up to the trust entrusted to him. What right did he have to plead for mercy? Li Yue crawled in front of the two of them with great difficulty. She tugged at the plain white clothes that were completely stained with blood, and her eyes were filled with pleading as she said, "Ning Chun, even if royal brother was wrong, you've already crippled his cultivation. For Yue's sake, please spare his life. If you do something wrong, you have to pay the price. A life for a life is my bottom line. Don't make me lose my last bit of rationality." Ning Chun waved his hand and pushed Li Yue away. He picked up Li Yan and turned into a ray of light. "Chase after him," Li Yue urged anxiously. Chu Jiang and Elderly immediately turned into rays of light and chased after him together with Li Yue. On the weapon forging table, the earth craftsman walked down silently. His heart was very complicated. The world was unpredictable. Who would have thought that things would develop to this point? It was just a slight mistake, but the result was the difference between heaven and earth. The Lihua dynasty's 100-year plan was ruined at the moment of success. On Half Moon Mountain, a figure in plain clothes flew over. The man in his hand had his hair dyed red and blood dripped from his body. He was extremely miserable. The ruler of a dynasty had fallen to this point. Was he a tiger that had fallen to the plains? Or was he asking for it? Who could judge? It was just like General Xian who had been betrayed. If it weren't for a master who loved her, who would have thought of her after falling to the dust? Being weak meant not having the right to choose. Being weak meant being bullied, being betrayed, and unable to resist. The killing intent in Ning Chun's eyes was so thick that it could not be dispersed. He hated Li Yan, but he hated himself even more. He had taught her how to cultivate her heart and how to treat others with her heart, but he hadn't taught her how to guard against others. As a master, he had failed in his duty. Half Moon Mountain was a bottomless cliff. Clouds and mist curled around it, making it impossible to see what was below. Even Xiantian cultivators couldn't see through the cliff. So how could it possibly be 10,000 feet tall? General Xian was only at the 6th grade of the natal realm, and she had been poisoned first. If she fell, she would definitely die. With a flash of light, Ning Chun appeared at the edge of the cliff. Looking down, a rare trace of pain flashed through his eyes. In his life, he was rarely willing to give his feelings, because he couldn't bear it anymore. Meeting General Xian was just an accident. Later on, he felt her persistence and admired her martial spirit. Only then did he have the heart to teach her. Since he had acknowledged the existence of General Xian, he used all his efforts to teach her. Day by day, he watched the little girl who was as quiet as a little beast grow up. Although he had never told anyone, the gratification in his heart truly existed. His dream of family was shattered. His black hair, still dyed with blood, fluttered in the cold wind. Ning Chun carried Li Yan and stood at the edge of the cliff, unable to speak for a long time. Your Majesty, Ning Chun, Chu Jiang, elderly, and Li Yue caught up. Looking at the figure at the edge of the cliff, they anxiously called out. Li Yue's teary eyes were pleading. She was pleading for her brother's last chance to live. No matter what he did wrong, as his sister, how could she watch him die? Ning Chun looked at the pleading Li Yue and thought of Xia Zi and Xia Xinyu. He also thought of Wild and Crown Prince Man, who didn't give him any face because of his sister. It seemed that the imperial family wasn't as filthy as he had imagined. Brotherly love was always the most precious and rare emotion. If he had done something wrong, perhaps Ning she would have done the same. Letting go of his hand represented the final judgment. The figure that fell down the cliff disappeared in the blink of an eye. Imperial brother. After so many days of nervousness and today's sudden change, Li Yue vomited a mouthful of blood and fainted. Chu Jiang and Elder Li's figures flashed. They wanted to go down the cliff to save her, but they were forced back by a sword. The price of betrayal could only be repaid with their lives. Ning Chun sighed at Li Yue's feelings for her brother, but he still wouldn't show any mercy. If he showed mercy, who would show mercy to General Xian? The cold sword was unshakable. The blood in the green was glaring. Sliver by sliver, it sealed the two's hope. At this moment, a figure flew out from below the cliff. He was carrying Li Yan who had fallen down the cliff. Seeing the plain-clothed young man at the edge of the cliff, a strange expression flashed across his face. It's you. It's you. The two pairs of eyes were cold. Knowing destiny and Qinghua moved at the same time. The moment they clashed, they stopped at the same time. It wasn't that their hostility had dissipated. It was that they had appeared here. Jianghua was the peerless genius of the general family. He was a heaven's pride that lived under praise and reverence. He shouldn't have come here, but he had unexpectedly appeared. Was it brotherly love? Perhaps it was. For more than 10 years, no one had ever seen Jianghua say anything about the injustice that Jiang Xian had suffered. Even after he became the head of the family, he still held an indifferent attitude. Gradually, many people, including Jiang Xian herself, began to forget that this dazzling son of the general family had a younger sister by the name of Jiang Xian, and not the shame of the general family, Jiang Xian. Chapter 257. At the edge of Half Moon Cliff, the coldness in their eyes gradually faded. Jiang Xian hasn't died yet, said Jianghua. Ning Chun narrowed his eyes. How is that possible? I can't save her by myself. I need help, said Jianghua. I'll go with you. Ning Chun didn't hesitate. His figure flashed and he jumped into the cliff. Did you throw him down? How should we deal with him? Asked Jianghua calmly as he looked at Li Yan. Ning Chun grabbed Li Yan, and a snow-white sword condensed in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the snow-white sword pierced through Li Yan's body and nailed him to the cliff. Let's go. After doing all this, Ning Chun called out and jumped down the cliff. Soon he disappeared from sight. Jianghua glanced at Li Yan nailed to the cliff. What a ruthless method. In the next 3 days, this person would truly experience what it meant to live a life worse than death. However, Jianghua did not care about this. He moved his feet and quickly followed. On Half Moon Cliff, Chu Jiang panicked when he saw Li Yan in danger. He was about to help. But just as he was about to approach, a surge of sword intent spread out, and Chu Jiang was immediately sent flying. Ugh! A painful groan resounded through Half Moon Cliff. The sword intent spread out and entered Li Yan's meridians. His entire body was in pain, and his blood dyed the cliff red. Your Majesty! Chu Jiang panicked. Elderly immediately stopped him from continuing. Don't be rash, or His Majesty will suffer even more. Then what should we do? Asked Chu Jiang. Wait. Elderly slowly said. The sword intent of the observing snow sword should disperse in 3 days. Before that, they could only pray that His Majesty would be able to endure. On the cliff, the blood-covered figure's consciousness was gradually fading. Blood dripped down his clothes drop by drop. This was the merciless call of death. Although the people on the cliff wanted to help, they were powerless. They could only watch as Li Yan's life force slowly disappeared from his body. At the bottom of the cliff, two silhouettes appeared. Ning Chen looked around at the fog-shrouded area, and a glint flashed in his eyes. "Be careful. This place is much more dangerous than you imagined," warned Jianghua. "Yes," Ning Chen responded. Just as he took a step forward, the knowing destiny sword in his right hand suddenly trembled. The blood pattern on the sword lit up and connected with his blood vessels. In the blink of an eye, it merged back into his body. "Is it time?" Ning Chen frowned as he sensed the dormant sword in his body. This sword had yet to be fully matured. Now that it had been forcefully reborn, he did not know how long it would take for it to recover. Jianghua also noticed this and asked, "Can you still fight without your sword?" "It's fine, please lead the way," Ning Chen calmly replied. Jianghua didn't say anything more. He stepped forward and walked into the depths of the fog. Ning Chen followed and walked forward with him. The fog in the air was getting thicker and thicker. Gradually, the innate spirit sense couldn't sense things too far away. It was severely restricted. On the road ahead, the pressure grew stronger and stronger, and the two of them became more and more cautious. Time passed bit by bit. The blazing sun moved westward, and the day was coming to an end. The fog in the valley grew thicker and thicker. All of a sudden, sword lights appeared above the two of them. They were bone-chilling and fell silently. Clang! The two divine weapons faced each other. Moonlight flickered. Now that they had been reborn, they were completely different from the last battle. They seemed to have gained something else, and their spirituality was overwhelming. The weapon of providence in Ning Chen's hand shone with a flawless white light. When he swung his saber, space shrieked and a glaring crack appeared. When the saber and sword clashed, the two of them both took several steps back. This was just the first clash, and they were already at a disadvantage. "What is it?" Ning Chen frowned and asked. "I don't know." Jianghua's expression was grave. There were no records of such dangers below Half Moon Cliff. If he had not come down once, he would also know nothing about it. Sword lights flashed through the fog. The two of them used their sabers to resist. After fighting for a long time, they still couldn't find their opponent's aura. "Buy me some time. I'll disperse this fog." Ning Chen shouted and turned his saber. Silver light shone brightly around him. Jianghua understood and spun his saber rapidly. Saber lights soared into the sky, turning the area 10 meters around the two of them into a forbidden zone. Clanging sounds rang out incessantly, but none of the swords could break through the saber lights and get within 10 meters of the two of them. The life scroll was circulated to its limit. Surging cold air quickly spread out, and the surrounding fog turned into raindrops. In an instant, everything became clear. There was no longer any fog obstructing their vision. Around the two of them, 12 swords of different shapes circled around them. Their sword lights were eerie and frightening. "Jianghua, where are you?" Ning Chen asked as he swung his saber and knocked away the incoming sword lights. Jianghua cut his finger and used his blood as a guide to form many complicated hand seals. A moment later, a faint blood-red light soared into the sky from the depths of the eastern valley, reflecting in front of the two of them. "You go and save them first," Ning Chen quickly said as he flipped his palm and forcefully grabbed a sword. "Yes." Jianghua did not waste any more words. He quickly rushed toward the eastern valley. 6 of the 11 sword lights wanted to chase after him. However, the saber and sword hummed together. Saber lights appeared from the sky and blocked all the attacks. At this moment, Jianghua's figure was already far away and disappeared into the valley. After Jianghua left, Ning Chen forcefully activated his martial arts to destroy the remaining consciousness in the swords. The next moment, his martial senses were raised to the limit, and he fought against the 11 sword lights with all his strength. The battle was fierce and intense. At this moment, in the depths of the valley, there was the same earth-shattering sound of the formation. The strange situation was difficult to understand. Ning Chen was worried about the safety of Jianghua in the valley. He held his saber and sword together, 9 of them attacking, and 1 of them defending. He wanted to break out of the formation as soon as possible. There were new wounds on his plain clothes. The 11 sword lights were unusually sharp and came and went without a trace. It was as if 11 upper sky realm experts were working together. It was overwhelming. The saber light and sword intent were drowned by the sword lights. In the depths of the valley, Jiang Hua was also covered in blood, and was seriously injured. This was an unrecorded primitive place. As soon as it showed its ferocious power, the two peerless geniuses in the world were surrounded by danger. Scroll of Heaven, absolve heaven of innocence. At this moment, among the layers of sword lights, the heavenly book moved that had never appeared in the world rose. He held his sword in reverse, and turned his saber rapidly. The blue brilliance reflected the last remnants of the sun, and turned into a skyrocketing light that slashed down. Crack crack, the 11 swords around him were broken. The broken swords scattered all over the sky. Ningchen staggered. The extreme move triggered the injury that he had not recovered from yesterday. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His saber and sword fell to the ground. The blood was dazzling. Jiang Xian. Ningchen stood up with difficulty. A stream of light flashed, and rushed to the depths of the valley, where the fierce battle was taking place. The sun set and the moon rose. In the depths of the valley, the thick fog rose again. The sound of the battle shook the world. The light of the saber and sword vibrated everywhere, destroying the entire valley. Jiang Hua's body was covered in blood, especially on his right arm. There was a deep wound that showed the bone. He was seriously injured. The figure opposite him had a leopard's body and a dragon's head. Its huge body was red and dazzling. It held a red sword in its mouth. The flames on the sword were rising. Yazi. Ningchen looked at the beast in front of him. His body shook and he was in disbelief. A leopard's body and a dragon's head. It held a sword in its mouth. It had fierce eyes. All the characteristics showed that the beast was the second son of the dragon Yazi. In the distance, 3 waterfalls fell into the pool below. Affected by the scorching temperature, the water in the pool evaporated unceasingly. White fog curled up and quickly filled the air. Through the fog, an unconscious figure could be seen floating in the pool. The red light was faintly discernible. It was already very weak. After Ningchen saw it, his body moved quickly. He quickly rushed to the pool. Roar! A sky-shaking roar echoed. The red sword flew out of Yazi's mouth. With a loud bang, it fell from the sky. Ningchen used his sword to fight against the sword. However, he felt a wave of fire in his face. The ground below him was instantly scorched. The Qingyu was sharp. It streaked across the sky like a stream of light. However, the dragon's head swallowed and spat out red lightning. With a loud bang, Jiang Hua was blown away. Feelings of snow. Frost surged. The sword light soared into the sky. It went against the wind and snow. It fought the beast bravely. The swords collided. Ningchen suppressed the injuries in his body. The sword spirit circled around his body. The silver light blossomed in the wind and snow. It was exceptionally dazzling. Jiang Hua also activated his martial arts. His sword spirit was awakened from the Qingyu. The moonlight shone from the 9 heavens. The 2 moons were in the sky, competing with each other for glory. The 2 prides fought against Yazi. It was an unparalleled ancient mythological beast. It was infinitely close to the humans' 3 disasters. In addition to its innate talent, it was terrifyingly powerful. The 2 of them were both dyed red. However, because of the figure in the pool, neither of them retreated half a step. On the half-moon cliff, the cold wind rustled. The cold moon from the east sprinkled on the ground. Between the broken cliffs, Li Yin was nailed to the cliff by the snow sword. There was not much vitality left in his body. On the cliff, Elder Li was waiting silently. He was completely powerless. Chu Jiang brought the unconscious Li Yue back to the palace. It was not only to heal her injuries, but also to stabilize the situation in the court. The country could not be without a ruler. Li Yin suffered such a great disaster. The possibility of him surviving was less than 1 in 10. Even if he did not die, he would be crippled. It was impossible for him to rule the Lihua dynasty. Although it was cruel, it was an irreversible fact. For the sake of the Lihua dynasty, it was unavoidable to choose a new ruler. However, Li Yin only had 1 son. He was not even 5 years old. Even if he ascended the throne, it would be difficult for him to rule. The worst thing was that Duke Muyang had a large number of troops, and the sacred land behind him. He was a great threat to the new emperor. Chu Jiang and elderly did not know much about the matters in the court, so they could only leave it to Li Yue. Fortunately, the court did not know what happened to Li Yan, giving them some time to prepare. At this moment, the red light gathered and a blood-red figure walked out. Looking at the half-moon cliff that had been destroyed beyond recognition by the great battle, a glint flashed in his eyes. Elderly felt the aura behind him, and his body turned cold. He turned his wheelchair around and saw a red figure with red hair and red clothes. The powerful pressure he gave off was not any weaker than the previous two. Is this the place? Duan Fengchen did not pay attention to the person in front of him. He murmured and the red figure disappeared again. The figure rushed down the cliff. When he saw the person nailed to the cliff, his eyes narrowed. However, he did not make a move. The familiar sword intent was as sharp as before. This was a sword that could not be broken, not even him. The red figure quickly disappeared, and only the person nailed to the cliff was left. The cold wind blew and the scene was bleak. There was no technique or sword intent, only the most powerful power. It was as heavy as Mount Tai, and it was difficult for a human to shake it. Heaven scroll, eh? Ning Chen was about to use the heavenly book martial arts again when suddenly, his qi and blood stagnated, and he vomited. The aftereffects of the continuous battles were finally beginning to show themselves. First, he had barged into the spatial turbulence and fought against the Disaster King for almost 2 months. Then, because something happened to Jiang Xian, he was besieged by the Disaster King and several powerhouses from the Holy Land. His body had not been able to recover in time, and now, he had to fight against the 3 disasters-level vicious beasts again. His body was full of injuries, and it was difficult for him to continue. On the other side, Jiang Hua was not much better. When he went down the cliff alone to save people, he was already injured. Now he was even more injured. He tried to break through the Yazi's defense several times, but he was forced back by the lightning and fire. He could not advance, but he was also unwilling to retreat. The 2 blades stopped at this moment. Facing the 3 disasters, the 2 tribulation geniuses with incomplete bodies were now in the most dangerous situation. They could not retreat, nor did they dare to retreat. This was because the aura in the pool was getting weaker and weaker. If they retreated now, they might not have another chance. Am I late? At this moment, a red figure appeared in the distance. After a few steps, it arrived in the middle of the battle. You're not late. There's still time to collect its corpse. Jiang Huaidao pushed away the scarlet sword and retreated several steps. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and replied, "Ha!" Luan Fengchen waved his hand, and a flowing blood blade appeared. The slender blade flashed with a brilliant light, and he slashed at the Yazi. Roar! An angry roar shook the heavens. The Yazi opened its mouth and spat out a bolt of lightning mixed with scorching flames. It charged straight at the red figure. With a bang, the flowing blood blade slashed through the lightning and landed on the Yazi's head. But with a loud bang, the dragon's head remained unharmed. The dragon opened its mouth again, and Luan Fengchen hurriedly retreated, avoiding the lightning. He glanced at the 2 covered in blood and said, "I can't believe you can last this long against such a monster." Cut the crap. Jiang Xian can't hold on any longer. I didn't call you here to listen to your nonsense. Jiang Hua's expression became even more solemn. Compared to the first time he had come down, Jiang Xian's aura was much weaker. It seemed like it could disappear at any moment. Life scroll. Ning Chen flipped his palm and condensed his qi. He forcefully circulated his body, and cold qi immediately spread out, filling the entire valley. For a time, the surrounding temperature rapidly dropped. The pool and waterfall rapidly froze at a visible speed, turning into a world of ice crystals. Within the pool, Jiang Xian's aura was already drifting. The cyclone within his body was pulled by the life scroll, and it began to rotate bit by bit, slowly healing his injuries. Seeing this, the Yazi let out a furious roar. The red light around its body became even brighter, and the world of ice collapsed. Ning Chen suffered a backlash and vomited a mouthful of blood. He suddenly staggered. Hurry up. I can't keep her alive for too long. Ningchen couldn't care less about his injuries. His figure flashed quickly, and the weapon of providence shone again. The pure white blade slashed across and a brilliant light shone. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen didn't say anything else. Qing Yu and Flowing Blood Blade pushed themselves to their limits and charged forward. The three geniuses used their full strength. The three blades' light covered the moon in the sky, and their sharp auras caused the flames around them to collapse. For the first time, they seemed to be evenly matched. The Yazi's ferocious aura was limitless. Its furious roar shook the heavens and earth, and terrifying sound waves spread out. Flames and lightning spewed out, and the red sword danced in the flames, trapping the three geniuses. In order to save Jiang Xian, Ningchen and Jiang Hua pushed their battle intent to the limit. They suppressed the pain in their bodies, and their blazing battle souls lit up the world. Wan Fengchen was at his peak. Adding on the fact that he had taken back his own blade, his battle strength had greatly increased. In order to cooperate with the two, he also pushed his cultivation to the peak. The three geniuses fought the Yazi, and the blade light fought the sword. The scorched earth rumbled, and was swept up by the powerful aura, turning into a 100-meter-long sandstorm. Rivers and mountains drink hatred, blood maples October red. Luan Fengchen used his ultimate skill for the first time. The slender blood blade shone brightly, and an endless amount of blood-colored light rose up. It was like the October maples, and red light covered the sky. Moon shadow. With the help of Jiang Hua's yin blade, the moonlight scattered, and the moon disappeared. In the next moment where the moonlight shone, a flowing shadow appeared out of thin air and slashed down. The two geniuses' ultimate skills were unparalleled. They directly cut through the flames and lightning, and landed on the Yazi's body. With a loud bang, the Yazi roared and retreated a few steps. Drops of beast blood dripped from its head. It was the first time it had been injured. At that moment, Ningchen's body moved. He raised his hand and pointed. His sword intent shone brightly. In the midst of the falling snowflakes, a snow-colored sword condensed. The sword followed Ningchen, and arrived in front of the Yazi in an instant. At the same time, the red sword appeared. Flames surged as it slashed down with the power to break the sky. Ningchen did not care about the incoming sword. He gathered all of his power into the sword. Immediately, the wind and snow became like a wave. It actually suppressed the endless sea of flames in an instant. The sword intent roared, and a dazzling silver light gathered. It went through the Yazi's wound, and directly penetrated its body. With a shocking roar, the red sword fell at the same time. Bai flew out and blood splattered all over the sky. The dust gradually dispersed. The figure kneeling on the ground was bleeding like a fountain, dyeing the ground in front of him red. Ningchen's left shoulder and arm had a terrifying sword wound. The broken bones of his arm could be faintly seen. It was extremely eye-catching. "How are you?" Jiang Hua rushed over and grabbed Ningchen. He retreated 30 meters and asked, "Don't worry about me. Cherish this opportunity." Ningchen pushed Jiang Hua away and staggered to his feet. His right hand grasped the blade that was originally in his left hand. He forcefully endured his injuries, and withdrew the wind and snow around him. The heavenly scroll rose again. It rose endlessly and shone brightly in the night. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen focused their minds. Their blades resonated and two blade intents surged out, illuminating the moonlit night. The heavily injured Yazi roared furiously. Its aura flickered. Waves of fire spread out. It was extremely ferocious. The three blade lights worked together to break the ferocious aura. The red sword slashed down. Jiang Hua was the first to be sent flying. Behind him, Luan Fengchen cut through the waves of fire. Raging thunder rushed past, and also retreated a dozen steps. Finally, Ningchen condensed his chi with his heavenly scroll. The heavenly scroll's moves were pushed to the limit. His blade light soared into the sky and gathered the last of his strength. With a loud explosion, the Yazi's body crashed into the ground. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Seeing an opening, Jiang Hua's figure flashed and arrived at the pond behind the Yazi. He grabbed Jiang Xian and quickly flew back. However, at that moment, the Yazi faced the sky and roared. Its ferocious aura shook the heaven and earth. Thunder and fire filled the sky like a storm. Its destructive power made the three's expressions change. Take Jiang Exine and leave. At the critical moment, Ning Chen shouted anxiously. He flipped his palm and forcefully activated the original aura in his body. In an instant, lightning, frost, and wind surged out in the air. Along with the surging blood mist, it turned the area around him into a blood-red world. Jiang Hua did not hesitate. He stepped on the air and quickly left with Jiang Exine. What a hateful aura! Wan Fengchen's expression was cold. His flowing light blood blade rose up. He used his ultimate move to resist the Yazi's attack. In that instant, the entire half-moon canyon collapsed. Two streams of blood flew out from the sand. After landing, they were still unable to withstand the huge force, and were forced back dozens of steps. Let's go! Wan Fengchen's figure flashed, and she arrived at Ning Chen's side. She supported the exhausted Ning Chen and quickly left. The cold moon hung high in the sky. On the other side of Half Moon Cliff, three figures appeared. They all coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered. Next time there's a loss like this, don't call me again. Luan Fengchen wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and bitterly smiled. Ah, we're friends. There's no need to be so calculative. Jiang Hua put down Jiang Exine and turned his palm to heal her, but he was stopped by a hand. Her cultivation technique is special. Let me do it. Ning Chen took a step forward. Your body? Jiang Hua asked with a frown. It's fine. I can still hold on. Ning Chen nodded and walked forward. He raised his hand and frost filled the sky. The life scroll's radiance was dazzling. Heaven and earth's spiritual qi entered his body and transformed into boundless true qi that poured into Jiang Exine's body. Chapter 259. Snow began to fall from the sky at an unknown time. One after another, beautiful snowflakes drifted down from the top of Half Moon Mountain, gradually dyeing the world into a snowy white color. On the other side of Half Moon Cliff, three figures were standing on the cliff. The wind and snow around them had formed a huge whirlpool that revolved around the plain-clothed youth. The other two were standing outside the whirlpool, waiting solemnly. These three heavenly geniuses from different realms were covered in injuries. In order to save Jiang Exine, they had joined hands to fight the three calamities. They had almost all died at the Yazi's hands. It was said that the Yazi was the most vicious of all vicious beasts. Even looking at it for too long would cause it to crazily retaliate. Jiang Exine had the aura of the phoenix blood on him. When he had fallen down the cliff, the Yazi had sensed it and sucked him into a pool of water. However, the Yazi was already infinitely close to the three calamities. Adding on its innate talent, it was not inferior to the three calamities. Jiang Exine's cultivation base was too weak, and he couldn't bear the Yazi's berserk aura. Perhaps if he had been a moment later, he really would have been unable to save himself. Within the wind and snow, blood dripped from Ning Chen's mouth, dyeing the ground red. The shattered meridians in Jiang Exine's body were healing at a visible speed. The phoenix blood was still there, speeding up his recovery. Outside the wind and snow, Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen calmly watched. They didn't dare to rashly interfere. They could only trust the plain-clothed youth and wait patiently. He's not a spy, said Jiang Hua calmly. Perhaps. Luan Fengchen sighed. How could he not see that? It was just that he also didn't want to believe that person had tricked him once more. No matter what you choose, at least before he recovers, I won't let you bring him back to the Holy Land, said Jiang Hua indifferently. Yes. Luan Fengchen nodded. He looked at the figure in front of him, not saying anything else. The snow in the sky grew heavier and heavier. A huge whirlpool fiercely revolved around Su Yi's body. Endless spiritual qi condensed. However, his broken body was unable to endure it. Ning Chen suddenly felt his strength run out. His body became unstable several times, and his aura rapidly scattered. Not good. Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen saw that Luan Feng's body was on the verge of collapsing. If he continued to force himself, he would be in danger. Thus, Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen charged into the snowstorm and channeled their Jinqi into his body. With the support of the foreign yuan, Ning Chen's figure finally stabilized. With a soft shout, the life scroll was activated again. As the silver light rose, it converted the two's true qi and infused it into the meridians around Jiang Xian. Vast vital energy vibrated, and the gates of hell seized his life. As time passed, General Jiang Xian's severely damaged body gradually recovered, and his expression returned to its normal state. The three of them stopped, each looking exhausted. Jiang Xian slowly opened her eyes as well. When she saw the familiar figure in front of her, she subconsciously called out, "Master!" A trace of gratification appeared in Ning Chen's eyes. In the next moment, his crippled body could no longer support itself. He staggered a step and fell forward. "Master!" Startled, Jiang immediately came back to his senses and supported the former. Just now, he saw that his master was covered in blood, and his almost crippled left arm. Returned to the general family's saber tomb, Jiang Hua helped the two of them over. His figure flashed as he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. Luan Fengchen's feet moved and a red shadow scattered as she followed behind. Half a day later, in the general family's saber tomb, Bai Yi lay quietly on a stone platform. Around her were ancient sabers gently swaying, flowing with the aura of time. The saber tomb was a forbidden area of the general family. It contained the sabers of all the elders and above of the general family for thousands of years. Some had been corroded by time, and some had not been damaged even after thousands of years. The location of the general family's saber tomb was very secretive. Only the general family's patriarch of each generation knew about it. Coupled with the concealment of the formation, even innate masters would have a hard time finding it. Ning Chen's injuries were too severe, especially the sword wound from his left shoulder to his left arm. The flame qi had almost destroyed all the bones and meridians in his arm. It would take more than a day or two to recover. In the saber tomb, Jiang Hua and Luan Fengchen had already recovered from their injuries. Jiang Xian silently guarded Ning Chen's side. Since returning, she had not said a word. Jiang Hua came to check on her several times. When he saw Jiang Xian silently guarding her, he sighed in his heart and did not disturb her. 4 days later, Ning Chen woke up. Jiang Xian was startled at first, but then her tears fell like rain. She immediately threw herself into Ning Chen's embrace and cried. Ning Chen smiled tiredly and rubbed the girl's hair. He softly said, "All right, don't cry." Hearing the commotion, Jiang Hua quickly rushed over. They looked at each other seriously for the first time, and then spoke at the same time. "Many thanks. Many thanks." What were they thanking for? Although the two of them said it, they didn't know what to thank. One was Jiang Xian's master, and the other was Jiang Xian's brother. This was something they should do. Luan Fengchen also walked over and stood not far away, silently waiting for an answer. Ning Chen gently pushed the girl away and stood up. He looked at the red-robed youth in front of him and spoke of his origin. Eastern Divine Province, Grand Xia Jiming Marquis. Holy Son of the Four-Level Holy Sun. Luan Fengchen also did not hide anything. Ning Chen waved his hand, and a drop of phoenix blood flew out. It shone with a red light, and traces of powerful vitality spread out. "This is phoenix blood." A familiar aura floated in front of him. Luan Fengchen's expression finally changed. Wrong, it was all wrong. Phoenix blood was something only the Long Life Palace had. That person also had this aura. However, he had not gone back for a long time, and had gradually forgotten about it. He still remembered the first time they met on the Nine Cloud Mountains Jade Pearl Peak. He had felt that this person in front of him was familiar, but he hadn't remembered. Now he finally knew that this was the aura of phoenix blood. Before that, only the Calamity King of the Long Life Palace had phoenix blood. Eastern Divine Province. There is a place called Ascension Valley. The story wasn't long. Ning Chen calmly told it while the three listened. The more they listened, the more silent they became. The truth was always cruel and hard to accept. There were no strict boundaries between who was right and who was wrong. Only the human heart could judge. "I'm going back to the sacred land." With that, Luan Fengchen turned and left. His red hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. At this moment, he was no longer as free and easy as before. He was shackled and gradually sank. He had believed him, but he had been wrong. He had lied to him once again. 10 years of kindness. He had taught him martial arts, the Tao, and how to be a person. But now, he found that he could no longer see through him. Under the moonlight, the red figure carried a heavy weight. With a gust of cold wind, he disappeared. Your injury? Jiang Hua asked. It's fine. Ningchen shook his head and interrupted the former. Master. Jiang Xian's face was still tear-stained. Ningchen wiped away the tears on her face and said softly, Jiang Xian, practice martial arts well in the future. Listen to your brother's teachings. Remember, your master is #1 in the world. You are her disciple. You won't lose to anyone. Master, where are you going? I'll go with you. Jiang Xian panicked when she heard her master say goodbye. She grabbed his arm and refused to let go. Jiang Xian, your master has his own matters to attend to. Don't throw a tantrum, Jiang Hua advised. A smile appeared on Ningchen's face. In the end, he rubbed the girl's hair. Then he pushed her hands away and walked away. In the past, she couldn't have it, so he could only keep her by his side. Now that she had it, how could he stop her? As a master, he always hoped that she could obtain more. That way he could be at ease. Jiang Xian couldn't stop herself. She squatted there and cried. Those who heard her felt an indescribable bitterness in their hearts. Jiang Hua stood to the side and silently waited. He didn't dare to say anything. Ningchen continued north and didn't look back even once. When he first heard Jiang Hua's name, he didn't have a good impression of him. No matter how dazzling he was, someone who couldn't even protect his younger sister was still shameful. Later, after the battle at the Jiang family, Jiang Hua rushed back from outside. The first time they met, it was a life-and-death battle. At that time, there was no nonsense to be said. There was only a life-and-death battle. After that, they met on Half Moon Cliff. Their first reaction was to fight with swords. After calming down, they guessed each other's intentions. During the battle with the Yazi, both he and Jiang Hua's martial arts weren't complete. They were surrounded by danger. Seeing the unshakable might of the 3 disaster beasts, and Jiang Hua still unwilling to retreat, he knew that this man was a good brother. Everyone had a different way of protecting. Perhaps it was just that outsiders didn't know. The cold moon had completely disappeared. The cold wind rustled. On Half Moon Cliff, Bai Yi gathered. She glanced at the empty cliff and turned to leave. He didn't die. He was really lucky. Rumor had it that the emperor was blessed with luck. As long as it wasn't a fatal situation, there would always be surprises. Now it seemed that the rumor wasn't false. Luck had existed since ancient times. There was a weapon in the Great Xia Palace that suppressed luck. The reason why the Great Xia dynasty was invincible for thousands of years was because of this weapon. It wasn't hard to guess the use of the sword in his hand. When the weapon was being forged, Li Yan, Li Yue, and 2 other innate experts were present. This already explained a lot. In addition, the Li Hua royal family wasn't as loyal to the sacred ground as imagined. Li Yan risked the revenge of an innate expert to betray his heart to the sacred ground. The only explanation was that he wanted to divert the sacred ground's attention. And the rumors about him and his senior, that were spreading around a few days ago, should be Li Yue's doing. In the world, no divine weapon could make an emperor so nervous, unless this weapon was related to the country. However, what surprised him was that the Li Hua royal family's weapon of destiny had just been forged. Then, in the past few hundred years, what was the weapon that suppressed the dynasty's luck? Who is it? In the past, he didn't think in this direction. Now that Li Yan and Li Yue gave him a hint, he couldn't waste such a good idea. In the earthly craftsman manner, there were no more clanking sounds. After forging the weapon, the earthly craftsman put down the hammer in his hand. Every day, he would just sweep the snow or plant a cold moon plum blossom in the courtyard. The cold wind blew a waterfall of snow. The snow hadn't completely fallen, but there was red in the snow. It was the blood on his clothes. Bai Yi appeared and walked into the courtyard. When the earthly craftsman saw the young man in front of him, his hand that was planting flowers paused. He said softly, "Sorry." Ningchen didn't say anything. He waved his hand, and a pure white sword appeared in front of him. He said, "I'm just here to ask. Is this the weapon of destiny?" The earthly craftsman was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Yes." "Name it," Ningchen said calmly. "Nianqing." the earthly craftsman said softly. Heh. Ning Chen turned around. When the snow fell, Bai Yi left. Bai Yi's figure flew higher and higher above the Li Fire Empire. He looked down at the entire Qingli city. The surrounding qi poured into the sword. In an instant, a dazzling white light bloomed in the sky, illuminating the entire horizon. In the next moment, the ground beneath the imperial palace shook. Vast amounts of purple qi rose into the sky. However, before it could fly, it seemed to be bound by something. It couldn't move even half a step forward. This shocking scene shook the entire imperial palace. Li Yue, Duke Muyang, and the imperial consecrators all sensed it and hastily walked out. Is this it? Ning Chen took a step forward and sped down. His falling momentum increased the power of his sword. With a slash of his sword, a huge crack appeared in space. It shocked everyone. Under the terrifying sword light, a majestic palace in the center of the imperial palace suddenly collapsed. An ancient bronze bell wailed, and then exploded, filling the sky. Within the holy palace of the four extreme holy lands, a person's expression instantly changed. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked in the direction of the Li Fire Empire. When the ancient bell shattered, the Li Fire Empire's karmic luck that had been suppressed for hundreds of years flowed out like a spring. Ning Chen waved his hand, and white sword light flashed. He circulated his body, forcibly absorbing the karmic luck of the heavenly cycle into his sword. Thunder rumbled in the sky. The huge change that had occurred hundreds of years ago had appeared again today. Within the imperial palace, Li Yin seemed to sense something and woke up from his coma. His crippled body trembled powerlessly, but he couldn't change anything. The experts of the Holy Lands and the imperial consecrators of the Li Fire Empire rushed over, wanting to stop him. However, they were all blocked by the karmic luck. They couldn't get even half a step closer. Ning Chen. Li Yue rushed over. Looking at the figure within the lightning and purple qi, a trace of powerlessness flashed across her beautiful face. Without karmic luck, the Li Empire would be like cotton floating in the rain. It would be precarious. In his heart, did he really not care about friendship at all? Thunder rumbled, becoming more and more shocking. The moment all the purple qi was absorbed into the sword, it suddenly descended. Ning Chen swung his sword, splitting the sky. The lightning that filled the sky collapsed and dissipated. The pure white sword had now turned purple. Purple qi curled around it, appearing and disappearing at times. It was extremely shocking. The instant they brushed past each other, Ning Chen paused and calmly said, Senior earthly craftsman said that this sword is called Remembrance. Do you think this name is correct? Chapter 260. Hearing the question, Li Yue's body trembled. She wanted to beg him to show mercy, but she did not know how to say it. The figure that brushed past her eventually left. No one dared to stop him, and no one could stop him. In the cold wind, the bloodstains on her clothes were still so glaring. She could no longer raise her left arm. A word of gratitude was as light as a feather, but it was as heavy as Mount Tai. The past flashed before his eyes like reflections. There was joy, sorrow, kindness, and even the hatred of betrayal. Gradually, it faded, dispersed, and disappeared with the wind. At the last moment, the last words left by the person who left were vague and hard to understand. Li Yue's body shook. There was no joy in her heart, only the pain that she could not suppress. She bowed deeply. This was the last greeting she could give to the dynasty as the eldest princess. In the next moment, the white clothes vanished, vanishing into nothingness. 10 days later, the new emperor of the Lihua dynasty ascended the throne. A child who was not even 5 years old, the only bloodline of the royal family, ascended the throne. The new emperor was still young. In the past, the empress and the eldest princess ruled together. But everyone knew that from now on, the person in charge of the dynasty would be the beautiful figure behind the beaded curtain. Duke Muyang controlled a large number of troops and became the biggest variable. Especially after the new emperor ascended the throne, things started to become unstable. The 3 Khanate consecrators of the royal family became the biggest support of the Li dynasty. After the upheaval, Li Yue's personality changed a lot. She became more mature and diligent in political affairs. She no longer had the charming smile of the past. At the top of the 9 heavens, in the turbulence of space, Meng Xuanji was still approaching the sky screen. She was not far from the truth. Even though she believed most of what he said, she still wanted to take a look personally to make the final confirmation. In the 4 extremes sacred ground, in the sacred palace, an intense battle broke out. Red saber light illuminated the world. In the end, Hongyi was heavily injured and escaped from the sacred ground. The master of the 4 extremes did not send anyone to chase after her, and let Wan Fengqian leave. Half a day later, a young man in blue walked into the palace and knelt down respectfully. "Greetings, master." "Xianji, get ready," said the master of the 4 extremes. "Yes." Xianji bowed respectfully. His overly handsome face was expressionless as he got up and left. The experts of the sacred ground all bowed when they saw the blue figure walking out of the sacred palace. Many of them were at the 3rd tribulation of the Khanate tribulation. In the Holy Lands, strength was everything. There was only one exception, and that was the person in front of him. A 2nd-grade Khanate realm cultivation wasn't outstanding. However, Xianji was the person with the highest status in the 4 extremities realm other than the State Lord and the Holy Sun. The 100-year-old plan, the overt and covert arrangements, and the plan to massacre the sects were all made by the person in front of him. Step by step, he pushed forward the plan of Shenzhou. Now the opportunity to open the passage between the 2 realms was right in front of them. Xianji was the only and most suitable candidate. In front of the Holy Land, the light of a formation platform flickered. Within the formation, a black and white jade pendant floated up and down. It was the Yin-Yang jade, the most precious treasure of the immortal ascension realm of a major sect that had been destroyed. Xianji stood in the middle of the formation and formed a series of hand seals with a flip of his hand. The light of the formation grew brighter and brighter. 7 days passed, and the Holy Land was quiet, waiting for the most important moment of the century to arrive. In the Longevity Hall, the Disaster King moved, ready to go to the Holy Land. However, just 100 miles away from the Longevity Hall, he was stopped by a plainclothed figure. "It's you," the Disaster King said coldly, squinting his eyes. There was no reply. Only the light of the blade responded. Purple dragon chi surged, mighty and powerful. The Disaster King saw that the situation wasn't right. He retreated 100 feet and flipped his hands, trying to summon the rebirth mirror in the Longevity Hall. However, after waiting for a dozen days and nights, Ningchen wouldn't give him another chance. The light of the blade was like lightning, closing in on him. "Junior, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." The Disaster King was furious. He turned his palm and used the flowing light battle suit to block the light of the blade. With a bang, the 2 of them retreated half a step. Before they could recover, the light of the blade fell like lightning again. In an instant, a dozen purple lights flashed past. On the remembrance blade, fate was added to it. Space couldn't bear it. Cracks appeared and kept spreading, reaching hundreds of feet away. The Shenzhou War of the 4 Extremities realm was a battle of the future. Everything in the world was destroyed, and everything within dozens of miles was destroyed. Ning Chen's battle intent reached its limit. He was determined to cut down the Disaster King here. The purple light of the blade was mighty. Each strike was stronger than the last. The more the Disaster King fought, the angrier he became. As the king of the 3 disasters, he was forced to this point by a junior. How could he endure this? Ha! The pride of a king could not be blasphemed. The Disaster King roared angrily, and a gloomy aura spread out from his body. In an instant the entire ground was affected, rising up with a rumble. The might of the 3 disasters shook the world. Ningchen was not afraid at all. He stabbed his blade into the ground and slammed his right palm down. His body drew in the dragon chi in the blade, and a heavenly book martial art appeared. Earth Scroll, Earth Destruction, Mountain Destruction. The blade light rushed into the sky like a tide. It was endless, rising from the ground and rushing into the sky. The shocking momentum shook the world. The rising ground immediately collapsed and was destroyed. Sand flew everywhere, and there was no place left intact. Purple chi flashed through the sand again, instantly arriving in front of the Disaster King. With a bang, the blade and palm collided. The vigorous force destroyed another 100 feet. The two people who had fought to the peak were filled with killing intent. They had surpassed the power of the 5 tribulations, and even the moonlight paled in comparison. Within the longevity hall, the two Sciention experts sensed the shockwaves from the battle in the distance. Just as they were about to go and help, they suddenly found themselves unable to move. The figure that appeared in the air was blurry, and they could not see her face clearly. She only raised a finger, and the world was frozen, making the two Sciention experts feel like they were trapped in a cage. He said that he wanted to focus on this battle without any distractions, so he could not be disturbed by anyone. She owed him a favor, and she had repaid it today. 100 miles away from the longevity hall, blood had already begun to seep out of the corner of Ning Chen's mouth. However, his battle intent was still unparalleled. The purple chi was like a furnace shining brightly. In his strongest moment, even though he had temporarily lost his sword and his left arm, he still relied on his cultivation and luck to fight the Disaster King alone. 3 terrifying slashes appeared on the Disaster King's battle armor. This was the best work of an earthly blacksmith. Its sharpness was comparable to the gilded feather saber, and even the flowing light battle armor was unable to block it. Blood-red light shone on the cold moon. With the 3 scrolls, Ning Chen's battle prowess was no longer inferior to anyone after using his luck to make up for the difference in cultivation. His battle spirit was dazzling. Damn it! The Disaster King forced the blade light back with a single punch. The humiliation of being suppressed completely erupted. Yuan condensed in his palms, and he used the Longevity Hall's 10,000-year legacy move. A black moon appeared in the sky, illuminating the world. As soon as the black moon appeared, all life within several dozen miles scattered. The flowers, birds, beasts, and insects all turned to dust, dissipating between heaven and earth. A surging might that could destroy the heavens struck fear into people. Boundless pressure spread out. Even 100 miles away, the forgotten sorrow could sense this terrifying aura. It looked into the distance, and a glimmer of light flashed through its eyes. In the battle, Ning Chen waved his hand, and Nianqing spun rapidly in the air. He raised his hand again, and snow drifted through the air. A snow-white sword condensed, and an instant later, the luck within the blade connected. The sword hummed as it absorbed the purple chi. Heaven and earth resonance. Frost condensed on the sword's fingers, and rays of light streaked through the air. The blade and sword flew out like purple rainbows. Heaven and earth resonance appeared in the world once more. With a loud bang, the 2 extreme moves collided. The black moon exploded, the sand flew wildly, and the wind howled furiously. The corners of the 2 people's mouths were dyed red as they retreated several steps. This was the first time the Disaster King felt the threat of death. He was unable to conceal his shock and fury. Ever since he had entered the 3 disasters, he had never felt something like this before. Even if he didn't want to admit it, the youth in front of him now had the strength to match him. Within the 4 extreme holy lands, Xianji's grand formation had already reached its final stage. The 4 extreme realms master appeared, and Xiantian also walked out. He silently followed behind the 4 extreme realms master. Disaster King, are you still not coming? The 4 extreme realms master looked into the distance, his dignified eyes flashing with light. The formation had already been completed. The 4 extreme realms master, Xiantian, and Xianji walked in. The formation flickered, and the 3 of them instantly vanished. At the peak of the 9 heavens, boundless spatial turbulence flowed. Meng Xuanji was already not far from the sky. She walked forward step by step. The light in front of her grew brighter and brighter. It was the light from another world, warm and unfamiliar. She didn't know that danger was right in front of her. At the peak of the 9 heavens, only those who had reached the 3rd tribulation could reach it. Coupled with the spatial turbulence, it wouldn't be easy to invade the divine prefecture. The Sacred Land's plan of 100 years and the Longevity Hall worked together openly and covertly. They first destroyed the Immortal Ascension realm in order to obtain the most crucial item in the plan, the Yin-Yang Jade. At the end of the spatial turbulence, Meng Xuanji, who had walked for nearly a month, finally reached the sky. She flipped her palm and pushed away the illusions in front of her. A barren land appeared before her. It seemed to be right in front of her, yet it was so far away that she couldn't touch it. Do you see it? How about it? Why don't you come with me and expand the divine prefecture? The four extreme realms master and Xianji appeared. They looked at the woman in front of them. Meng Xuanji's pupils shrank. A chill rose around her. She clenched her golden feather gauze tightly and was on full alert. What a pity! The four extreme realms master sighed softly. He raised his hand, and a surge of pressure swept down. Meng Xuanji was about to attack, when a clear sword suddenly emerged from her Dantian sea of qi. It was so silent that she couldn't react in time. How can this be? Meng Xuanji spat out a mouthful of blood, and her aura wildly scattered. She looked at the golden feather gauze in her hand, and was about to throw it into the spatial turbulence. However, Xianji was already prepared. He flipped his hand, and used a strange magical art. The golden feather gauze seemed to be bound by threads and slowly flew over. Xianji pulled out the clear sword, bringing with it a dazzling spray of blood. A gentleman couldn't be unsheathed. Xianji remained silent and didn't say another word. Ningchen, I'm sorry. Meng Xuanji has disappointed you. Meng Xuanji's kneeling figure was covered in blood. How pitiful and desolate was she to be reduced to such a state? Meng Xuanji covered her mouth as she coughed violently. Blood seeped through the gaps between her fingers, staining her eyes red. Outside the longevity hall, the separation death seal within Ning Chen's body rapidly scattered. In the blink of an eye, it had completely disappeared. Ning Chen's expression changed. Something had happened to Meng Xuanji. In that instant the saber light froze. The Disaster King seized the opportunity and pushed Ning Chen back with a palm strike. Then, he rushed towards the sacred land. Ning Chen came back to his senses and quickly chased after him. The two figures sped through the sky one after the other. After a flash of light, there was a vast expanse of purple qi. The Disaster King appeared in the sacred land. He stepped into the formation and quickly disappeared. Stop him. Hold on until this king and the realm master return. Yes. 7 Xiantian experts walked out. 2 were at the 4th tribulation, 2 were at the 3rd tribulation, and 3 were at the 2nd tribulation. The 7 of them worked together to stop the Disaster King with the help of the sword formation. Ning Chen faced him with a single saber. His purple qi had weakened a lot. For the sake of killing the Disaster King, he had to finish everything in one fell swoop. The Disaster King arrived. He glanced at Meng Xuanji, who was covered in blood, and sneered. In the end, it had still come to this. Begin. The realm master of the 4 extreme realms didn't ask anything. The Disaster King stepped forward and suppressed his injuries. His cultivation base was raised to the limit. Dim light soared into the sky as he raised his cultivation base to the limit. The realm master of the 4 extreme realms also condensed his qi. A 5-colored brilliance rose and poured into the golden feather lance. It crashed into the point where the 2 realms connected. In that instant, the entire realm master of the 4 extreme realms trembled. Countless volcanoes erupted and the earth cracked. It was like the end of the world. The mountains and rivers were being destroyed. Heaven and earth wept. In just an instant, countless people suffered the calamity of heaven and earth. Corpses littered the ground. It was a sad and desolate scene. A fine crack appeared in the boundary between the 2 realms, and it quickly widened. Xianji, the Disaster King, the realm master of the 4 extreme realms, shouted. His aura soared to the sky. He used all his cultivation base to open the crack to the point where one person could pass through. When Xianji saw this, his figure flashed and disappeared. At this time, space swirled and Suyi walked out. She looked around and quickly began to move. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.